Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Tony Alexander King. Rocio Juaninkov Hornos was born in 1979 in Spain and was the youngest of three siblings. Their parents divorced when Rocio was very young, and the children remained with their mother. Her mother, Alicia Hornos, raised her and her two older siblings, Rosa and Guillermo, in the town of Millas. Rocio was described as an angelic child. She had a positive outlook on life and was adept at finding solutions to challenges. She cared deeply for her mother and siblings. At that time, Rocio was also in a relationship with a boy who, according to many, loved her very much. However, everything changed on October 9, 1999. That day, Rocio spent the day and evening at her boyfriend's house, where his mother was also present. They decided to go to a fair in Fuengirola, a nearby village. Later that evening, around 9:30 p.m., Rocio chose to leave her boyfriend's house, saying she wanted to go home to shower and change before going to the fair. It was only a 500-meter walk back to her house, but something happened during her walk, and she never returned home. Rocio's mother thought her daughter had gone to the fair with her boyfriend or friends, so she didn't raise the alarm when Rocio didn't come home. Rosa and Guillermo were also waiting for Rocio at home, but hadn't heard from her either. When Rocio still hadn't returned by the next morning, Alicia became anxious. Alicia called Rocio's boyfriend. He said he hadn't seen Rocio and confirmed that they had planned to go to the fair, but that at the last moment, he fell asleep and didn't go anywhere. He mentioned that he had tried to call Rocio, but acquaintances said they hadn't seen her at the fair. He thought she had come home late and was very tired. Alicia was very worried because there had been no news about her daughter. Her anxiety grew until her partner Juan Chirillo suggested they take a walk to relieve some stress. He planned to show her some nearby ruins, hoping it would help her relax. Many people had reassured them that their daughter would return soon. As they walked, everything seemed normal, until Alicia spotted a pair of sneakers on the ground. She believed they belonged to her daughter. Continuing through the vacant lot, she became increasingly alarmed when she saw bloodstains and a piece of fabric. Feeling agitated, Alicia was convinced that something terrible had happened, so Juan called the police for assistance. The police arrived and secured the area to search for evidence. In addition to the sneakers, bloodstains, and fabric, they discovered tire tracks that had crossed over a puddle of blood, as well as a cigarette butt from a brand not commonly found in Spain. After analyzing the evidence, they found that the DNA from the cigarette butt did not match any records in the database, but they preserved the sample for future testing. The tire tracks indicated that the car involved was quite old and had not been made in Spain for 6 years. It was also determined to be a small vehicle. Since Rocio had practically vanished in the middle of the night, it was very difficult to find witnesses, especially since the area was not crowded. However, the first witness came forward after the evidence was collected. He was a taxi driver who reported that on the night of Rocio's disappearance, around 10 p.m., he was driving home from work and passed by the street where the evidence was found. He heard screams and became very scared, so he closed the windows of his car. The taxi driver also noticed a man inside an SUV and was able to provide a description of the man, which was used to create a composite sketch. The photo sketch was disseminated across all media outlets, so that people could provide information about this man if they knew anything. At the same time, the police were searching for this person in the nearby grove. In cases like this, the last person to see the victim, especially if they were a romantic partner, often becomes the main suspect. In this instance, that person was Jose Antonio Rios. The police examined his phone and interrogated him 6 times. His account raised suspicions for several reasons, one being that he couldn't recall what the victim was wearing that day. The victim's family provided information that contradicted Jose's statements. They stated that she was wearing a white t-shirt with a Nike logo and purple pants, but Jose insisted he had never seen her in that outfit. He claimed he was unfamiliar with the white t-shirt. Additionally, Jose's mother confirmed that the victim had been wearing a jacket when she left their house at 9:30 p.m. and she had helped fasten it on her. Jose's family was taken aback to find that the jacket was still at their home, suggesting that Rocio must have returned to Jose's house in different clothing that day. Jose insisted on his original account. When Rocio went her home, he fell asleep and he didn't know anything else. The location where the evidence was discovered was very close to Jose's house. If the girl had been screaming, as the taxi driver stated, Jose should have heard her since he lived on the lower floor. He claimed he didn't hear anything, and neither did his family. There was no way to verify his alibi as he claimed to have been sleeping at home. Only his parents and a few relatives could confirm that. It was also odd that he didn't offer to take his girlfriend home at such a late hour, even though they could have gone to the fair together. No suspicious calls were found on his phone, leading the investigators to halt further questioning. He appeared in various media outlets to talk about Rocio, expressing hope for her return and participating in the search efforts. The search for Rocio included all nearby areas, with the central zone being where the evidence was found. Alicia suspected that the attack might have occurred there, and there were concerns that Rocio could be seriously injured or even dead. They searched within a 75-kilometer radius of the location where the evidence was discovered. Alicia appeared on television, pleading for assistance in finding her daughter. In her desperation, Alicia consulted several mediums, all of whom claimed that her daughter was still alive. The search continued tirelessly until November 2, 1999. Unfortunately, that day ended in tragedy when police and family members discovered Rocio. She was found deceased near Los Altos del Rodeo Sports Club. The property included a lot with a tennis court, where Rocio's body was located. She was found under a tree by the owners of the court. Rocio was naked and had sustained stab wounds, burns, and significant damage to her body from lying beneath the tree for an extended period. The level of decomposition was so advanced that her identity could not be determined through physical features, and she was ultimately recognized by the jewelry she had been wearing that day. The autopsy determined that Rocio died on the same day she went missing. She had 9 stab wounds in various areas of her body, with marks from the weapon on her bones. Her throat had also been cut. 2 tied garbage bags were found near her body, suggesting that she had been transported to the location by car. These bags likely served to prevent blood from staining the trunk. The investigators believed that the perpetrator did not leave her there on the day of her disappearance, but rather several days later. Investigators discovered a badge next to the body. However, the badge had no name on it and therefore provided no useful information. The autopsy revealed that all 9 stab wounds were made with the same weapon, likely a pocket knife. 8 of these wounds were clustered on her back, indicating that she might have been unconscious or already dead when they were inflicted. The remaining wound on her front, like the 8 on her back, affected vital organs and contributed to her death. Additionally, pink fabric fibers were found at the scene. Besides, another bag was discovered at the crime scene containing her clothing. This bag held a hair that did not belong to Rocio, as it was dark, while she had blonde hair. Although this bag, along with the badge and fabric fibers found on the body, could have aided investigators, they were not useful at that time. The hair was rootless, and the technology then available could not analyze DNA without a root. The fabric fibers, identified as clothing fibers, could not be analyzed either. They needed to be compared with the suspect's clothing, and the samples would have to match exactly for the evidence to be significant. The only helpful item for the police was the clothing found in the bag, including a well-known white t-shirt. This t-shirt had traces that supported the theory that Rocio died from stab wounds and confirmed the number of wounds inflicted. A few weeks prior, 4 police officers noticed a car with multiple passengers while patrolling the area where Rocio later went missing. When they checking the license plate, they found that the car belonged to Dolores Vasquez. Dolores and Alicia have been in a romantic lesbian relationship for 10 years. Initially, their relationship was happy, and they bought a house where they lived with Alicia's children. However, issues arose as the children grew older. Dolores took on the role of disciplinarian and was much stricter than Alicia preferred. Dolores often criticized and punished the children severely, leading to frequent arguments between the couple. Ultimately, they decided to separate because their relationship had become unhappy. Even after the separation and Alicia moving out of their shared home, Dolores remained a significant figure in her life. Alicia, Rocio's mother, lacked higher education and struggled to find a well-paying job, which led to financial challenges for the family. Meanwhile, Dolores held a high-status job and provided substantial financial support to them. She often expressed her love for Alicia's children as if they were her own, particularly for Rocio, whom she practically raised. Dolores was instrumental in the efforts to find Rocio and also contributed financially to the investigation. As the investigation progressed, the police initially had several suspects, but that number gradually decreased. Almost a year after Rocio's death, in September 2000, the first arrest occurred. Dolores was taken into custody as the sole suspect. Dolores's arrest was initially controversial, as the police had no clear evidence linking her to the crime. Some initial clues led them to suspect that the real culprit might be a man, as suggested by a sketch provided by the only witness, a taxi driver. However, the police focused on Dolores, believing that she was motivated by a recent breakup with Alicia Hornos, Rocio's mother. They suspected that Dolores may have acted out of resentment. There were even rumors that Rocio played a role in the breakup, as her relationship with Dolores was said to be strained. These assumptions became the justification for Dolores's arrest. After the detention, one of Spain's most publicized and controversial trials began. Dolores was interrogated for several hours, but consistently maintained her innocence. Earlier, evidence suggesting her involvement had emerged. Pink fabric fibers found on Rocio's body were compared to Dolores's athletic clothing. Laboratory analysis indicated a near-perfect match, confirming that the fibers came from Dolores's clothing. This initial analysis was conducted by a toxicological laboratory, and the police announced the findings at a press conference, leading to a shift in public opinion against Dolores. However, at her attorney's request, a second analysis was conducted at a forensic laboratory. This time, the result was negative. Dolores's defense argued that the initial laboratory might have made an error. The case received widespread media coverage, and everyone had something to say about the actual findings of the police or Dolores's family life. Discussions arose suggesting that Dolores harbored deep-seated resentment towards Rocio. The trial commenced in 2001, and multiple testimonies revealed a very strained relationship between Dolores and Rocio. Alicia testified that Dolores often punished Rocio harshly, restricted her from leaving the house for many years, and frequently yelled at her. As a result, Rocio struggled academically, leading to further reprimands from Dolores, intensifying their conflicts. Alicia recalled a specific moment when Rocio expressed her fears, saying, "Mom, one day she is going to kill me, and you will do nothing." Rosa also shared her experiences of humiliation at the hands of Dolores. Initially, this behavior stemmed from Dolores's education. Unlike Alicia, who could read and write but had no formal qualifications, Dolores's education set her apart. Dolores often introduced Alicia as her sister to friends and acquaintances, rarely acknowledging her as a partner to anyone outside their close circle. This led Alicia to feel that Dolores no longer loved her or her family. A few months prior to the incident, Dolores had threatened Alicia because she refused to rekindle their relationship. Alicia was already with someone else. Alicia told Dolores that their romantic involvement was over, but Alicia was open to being friends and would offer help if needed. In response, she ominously warned Alicia, "You will cry bloody tears. You will be in pain." However, there was no evidence to show that Dolores was physically at the crime scene or had approached Rocio's body. The available evidence may suggest the guilt of someone else, rather than that of Dolores. Despite this, she was labeled guilty based on the evidence presented in court. The police suspected that Rocio knew her attacker. They believed this individual had given her a cloth to use on her wound after inflicting the first injury to the front of her body. However, when Rocio attempted to escape, the attacker, in a fit of rage, inflicted additional wounds to her back. The numerous wounds indicated a level of hatred and cruelty. One piece of evidence was a badge. Dolores participated in the searches, so she could have had access to these badges. Additionally, the testimonies of Dolores's employees came into play, indicating that Dolores was anxious and irritable on the days surrounding Rocio's disappearance. One employee reported that on the day Rocio's body was found, Dolores took a picture of her and began stabbing it with a knife, ultimately destroying the photo. Dolores claimed this was because the employee's Spanish was poor and she wanted to explain what had happened to Rocio. Meanwhile, the police have not released information about how Rocio was killed. An employee reported that on the day of the incident, Dolores shouted about a problem. Another piece of evidence against Dolores is that she usually took daily walks with a friend from Ukraine between 9 and 10 o'clock in the evening. However, on the day Rocio disappeared, Dolores did not meet with her friend and canceled their plans. Additionally, it was discovered that Dolores's phone was tapped, revealing a conversation in which she stated, "They have nothing." The police questioned her friends and family, prompting many to contact Dolores to check on her and ask what to say to the authorities. It became clear to the police that Dolores was confident she would not be caught, believing they had no evidence against her. However, Dolores's defense countered each point made by the prosecution. They presented a record of Dolores's phone calls from that day, both of which were lengthy. If she made her first call at 22:34 and the taxi driver heard Rocio scream around 10 p.m., it would have been impossible for Dolores to arrive, commit the murder, dispose of the body, and then make those calls in such a short time frame. Furthermore, when Dolores called her friends and family, none reported that she seemed nervous or acted unusually. Everything appeared normal. As a result, some evidence was dismissed. The defense also aimed to disprove the significance of a tire track found at the scene. The track belonged to an old car, while Dolores drove a newer Toyota with different tires. The prosecution suggested that Dolores could have rented a car, but this was deemed unlikely. Where could she have rented a car at 10 or 11 p.m.? Rental services would have logged such an unusual request, yet the prosecution had no proof that Dolores rented a vehicle. There was also a theory that she borrowed a car from a neighbor who left their keys in the car, but this idea was considered too far-fetched to be taken seriously. The DNA found on the cigarette butt belonged to a man. The taxi driver testified that he saw a man near the garbage bags containing Rocio's body. Fingerprints on the bags did not match those of Dolores, meaning there was no evidence to prove she was at the crime scene. The only accusation against her was a possible desire for revenge. Additionally, Dolores was known to be psychologically unstable, unfriendly, and often in a bad mood. This was a jury trial. The verdict was delivered not by the judge, but by the jury. The jury was composed of 9 members who deliberated for several hours. The decision was not unanimous, reflecting 7 votes in favor and 2 against. A few months into the trial, Dolores was found guilty of intentionally murdering Rocio Waninkoff and was sentenced to 15 years in prison. Here's what the police believe happened on October 9, 1999. Around 9:30 p.m., Rocio left her boyfriend's house to go home, intending to take a shower and change. While walking home, she encountered Dolores. They began to argue and the situation escalated. Dolores pulled out a knife and stabbed Rocio in the front. After injuring Rocio, Dolores nervously handed her a handkerchief to stop the bleeding. Fearing that Rocio would report her to the police, Dolores chased after her when she tried to flee. Rocio, weakened by her injuries, fell, and Dolores then stabbed her 8 more times. After confirming that Rocio was dead, Dolores placed her body in her car. To keep the interior clean, she wrapped the body in 2 plastic bags. For several days, she concealed the body while participating in the search for Rocio and giving interviews. Eventually, she moved the body to the location where it was later discovered. Dolores initially served her prison sentence, but in 2002, an appeal was filed on her behalf. The appeal was successful, leading to a new trial being scheduled. While Dolores awaited her second trial, both the defense and prosecution prepared to present new evidence. However, an unexpected event caused the trial to be postponed. In August 2003, a 17-year-old girl named Sonia Carabantes went missing from her village after the holidays. Sonia and her family had moved to Malaga after living in Switzerland for a while. As days passed without any news about Sonia, the police worked diligently to locate her. This situation reminded many people of the case of Rocio, as both girls were of similar ages and had similar builds. Tragically, Sonia's fate mirrored that of Rocio. On August 19, 2003, Sonia's body was discovered. She had been strangled and had multiple stab wounds. 2 days after the body was found, on August 21, an autopsy was conducted. During the examination, genetic material was discovered under the victim's nails. This material was identified as skin, indicating that the girl had struggled with her attacker. This evidence could help the police identify the murderer. A DNA sample was taken, analyzed, and entered into the database. The DNA under Sonia's nails matched 100% with DNA found on cigarette butts, linked to Dolores Vasquez from a few years prior. This was puzzling because the person suspected of killing Sonia was already in prison. This means that it is clear that someone else killed both girls. This information was beneficial for Dolores's defense, essentially clearing her of all charges. As a result, there was an increasing belief that Dolores was innocent. One woman stated that her ex-husband, Tony Alexander King, had been acting suspiciously around the time of Rocio's disappearance. She mentioned that he had scratches on his hands were swollen, and he brought home bloody clothes, claiming he had been injured in an accident. On the day Sonia disappeared, Tony visited her in a state of agitation, sweating, and with scratches on his body. When she asked him what had happened, he told her he had gotten into a fight outside a bar, but she found his explanation unconvincing. Tony was a British man living in Spain, near where the crimes took place. At the time, he was going through a divorce and had a child. The type of cigarettes found at the crime scene was Tony's favorite brand, which is rare in Spain. Tony was arrested on September 19, 2003. During the investigation, his DNA was collected, and the results confirmed a match with a cigarette butt and a sample found under Sonia's nails. After his arrest, details about his troubled past surfaced. Tony Alexander King, originally named Anthony Bromwich, was born in 1967. In 1986, he was sentenced to 10 years in prison for attacking several women. Additionally, he had been previously arrested for armed robbery. He served only half of his sentence before being released early for good behavior. Following his release, he changed his name and moved to Spain to start anew. In Spain, he met a woman named Cecilia Matilde Pantoja, and they had a daughter together, also named Sabrina. The Rocio family suspected that even if Dolores didn't commit the crime herself, she was somehow involved. They attended the court hearings for Tony. In 2005, Tony Alexander King was sentenced to 36 years in prison for the death of Sonia Carabantes, and an additional 7 years for an unrelated abuse assault he committed. The trial of Tony Alexander King in connection with the murder of Rocio Waninkoff, which took place in 2006. Initially, Tony claimed he had burned Rocio's body, which contradicted the official account. Although Rocio's body showed signs of burns and fire damage, it was not completely incinerated as Tony had stated. However, during the trial, Tony changed his story completely. He accused two individuals, Robert and Dolores, of being involved in the crime. He mentioned that he did not know Dolores well, but that they had a mutual friend, Robert. Tony explained that on October 9, 1999, he went to Robert's house to drink and do banned substance. After a while, he started feeling sick, and then Dolores arrived with another man. He alleged that Robert hypnotized him, and the next thing he remembered was sitting in a car with Robert and Dolores. Tony claimed that in the shadows of the car, Dolores attacked Rocio from behind. He said they placed Rocio in the trunk without realizing Rocio was still alive. Later, Robert got out of the car to check on Rocio. They then wrapped the body in bags to prevent any stains in the car. Tony insisted that he had minimal involvement and portrayed himself as merely a witness to a terrible crime. He is claiming that he left a cigarette butt at the scene. In the second trial, the defense pointed out that the car found at the crime scene was not Tony's car. There was an emerging belief that Tony was not acting alone. When asked why he had not mentioned this during his police arrest, he stated that Dolores had threatened to kill his daughter if he spoke up. On December 14, 2006, the trial ended, and the jury took 13 hours to deliberate. Tony King was convicted of the intentional murder of Rocio, while all charges against Robert were dismissed. Tony was sentenced to 19 years in prison and ordered to pay two compensations, €200,000 to Rocio's mother and €42,000 to her brother and sister. Dolores was released due to the lack of evidence to convict her for her involvement in Rocio's murder. This was a new version of the crime. One night, Tony approached a girl walking home and began to assault and intimidate her. He grabbed her by the neck and pushed her to the location where the evidence was later found. The girl fought back, and he stabbed her in the chest. During the struggle, Rocio managed to unmask him and attempted to flee, but he realized he had gone too far. None of his previous victims had escaped or sustained such severe injuries. After Rocio collapsed, he repeatedly stabbed her in the back until she was no longer breathing. He left her body there for several hours before returning in a car. It is believed that he had the accomplice who helped him load the body into the vehicle. For several days he kept the body with him before disposing of it where it was ultimately found. After the trial, Dolores moved to London and was granted compensation for the months she spent in prison. Many believe that the case cannot be considered closed, as there are still people who assisted Tony. Some think that those individuals could have included Dolores. The families of Rocio and Sonia suffered the loss of daughters who can never return. This case is quite complex, with many developments, particularly in Rocio's case. It remains uncertain whether a single DNA sample found on a cigarette butt was sufficient to place all the blame on Tony. Meanwhile, the Rocio family believes that Dolores played a role in the crime, even if she did not directly kill Rocio. The first test suggested that fibers from Dolores's clothing were found, but a subsequent test contradicted that finding. There is no concrete evidence against her. Unfortunately, without solid evidence, we can only theorize. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Amanda Colley and Lindy Dobbins. On the morning of August 27, 2015, 36-year-old Amanda Colley returned home to find her house in chaos. Someone had broken into her while she was away. Her house was in disarray, with boxes knocked over, trash cans emptied, and many items broken or damaged, with glass strewn everywhere. Amanda panicked and checked her phone, which had many missed calls and messages from her ex-husband that she didn't want to reply to. At 5:30 a.m., she called her boyfriend and the police for help. She had recently started dating a man named Lamar. At that time, Lamar was driving his pickup truck down a route that led to her house. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene. One officer arrived to assess the danger of the situation. He was to talk to Amanda and assess the damage to her property. The police assessed the situation and left after Amanda chose not to file a formal complaint. Before the police left her home around 9 a.m. that morning, someone came to Amanda's aid. The first person to visit was Lindy Dobbins, Amanda's best friend. At 39 and a mother of 3, Lindy had taken the morning off work to be with Amanda and support her. Lindy was a kind person who always helped others in difficult situations. After a while, their mutual friend Rachel Hendricks joined them. She had dropped her kids off at school and decided to support Amanda since she had some free time. By this time, Lamar was already at Amanda's house. The four of them gathered at Amanda's house, watching the chaos and discussing what had happened while considering their next steps. Amanda was still in shock from the incident and realized that she needed to consult a lawyer before reporting her ex-husband, who she believed was responsible. Eventually, Amanda's ex-husband called her again. This time, she chose to answer, leading to a 14-minute conversation. While they were in the living room, they suddenly heard the sound of shattering glass. A few minutes later, a police officer stopped Lamar on the street. He was running frantically, not paying attention to where he was going, trying to escape Amanda's house. According to him, he left the living room as soon as the shooting started, went down to the laundry room, and then fled through the garage, which was partially open. Lamar reported that unexpectedly, gunfire erupted at Amanda's house. He informed the police officer that he thought the shots were fired from outside the house. He did not observe anyone inside being hit by bullets. He was unable to give the police specific details. Lamar is certain that the attacker is targeting him, leading him to believe that the women inside the house are alive. The situation was dire. Minutes after Lamar left the house, the other women tried to escape. Rachel ran through the living room and through the broken glass front door. She spotted the neighbor's house next door and quickly ran over to hide. After escaping, Rachel called 911 to report that she had escaped but had injured her arm. She suspected that an armed attack had occurred at her friend's house and knew exactly who was likely responsible. Realizing the danger, Rachel instinctively ran away when Lamar told them to hide. She was shocked when the gunfire continued. While speaking to the police, Rachel expressed her concern for her friends and urged the police to come quickly to save them. In the next few minutes, 2 more calls came into the police station, one from Amanda and one from her friend Lindy. However, during the calls, they only screamed while the gunshots echoed in the background. The police immediately went to Amanda Colley's house to rescue her. Gunshot wounds to Lindy's arms and legs showed that she was trying to defend herself from her attacker. Unfortunately, her efforts were futile. The attacker had fired a full magazine at her, indicating a clear intention to kill. Lindy was discovered at the end of a long corridor, lying in a pool of blood. It seems she tried to escape, but was killed before she could get away. Rachel stated that just a few seconds before the shooting started, she looked toward the backyard of the house. There, along the garden path, she saw the outline of a man who then pulled out a weapon through the glass door. A group of people stood behind him. The glass was quite thin, preventing her from seeing exactly who was there. The police corroborated her account by analyzing the locations of the bullet holes in the backyard. On the path, they found several unused cartridges, which were identified as deli-caliber bullets. Lamar went back to Amanda's house. When the police arrived, he felt assured that they would have the situation under control. Lamar mentioned that he heard gunshots coming from the backyard and believed that he was the perpetrator's target. At that moment, he urged everyone to run. Although he did not see the perpetrator, he suspected that the perpetrator was Amanda's ex-husband, who had spoken to her on the phone just minutes before the attack. Rachel explained that they didn't have enough time to react as quickly as Lamar, so she and Lindy decided to hide in the pantry. She heard Amanda on the other side, probably trying to find a place to hide and possibly running to the bathroom. Seconds later, Rachel heard the front door being broken down. At that moment, the intruder entered the house. He approached the pantry, tried to open the door, and found that it was locked from the inside. The attacker wanted to know where Amanda's boyfriend was. Rachel and Lindy replied that he wasn't there while continuing to hold the door. The intruder then fired through the door, hitting Rachel's arm, causing her to lose her balance. Linda's leg was now injured, causing her to scream in pain. Amanda was also injured but still alive and screaming near the bathroom. In that brief moment, Rachel jumped up and ran from the house. According to Rachel, the attacker could have been Amanda's ex-husband, James Terry Colley. She recognized his familiar voice behind the door. A few minutes later, James's father called the police to report that his son had just confessed to him that he had caught his wife with a friend. At that point, the police arrived at the house. After the attack, James fled the scene. K-9 units were deployed to locate James. They followed James's scent to a nearby street. During the search, a cell phone was found, which was likely left behind by James. Unfortunately, the police were unable to identify the vehicle in which he drove away. He had disappeared from the scene of the crime. The area was searched with specially trained dogs and helicopters, but these efforts yielded no results. Despite an extensive search that lasted several hours, James remained at large, posing a threat to public safety. Fortunately, police arrested James later that evening while he was driving his sister's car. During a search of the car, police discovered a shotgun and 2 Delroy and PGO caliber handguns in the passenger seat, along with a large amount of ammunition. A subsequent examination of the gun confirmed that the bullets matched those found at the crime scene and in Amanda and Lindy's bodies. In addition, glass fragments identical to those found in Amanda's home were discovered. After his arrest, James refused to cooperate with the investigation, claiming that he could not recall anything from the time of the tragic events. Further investigation revealed that James and Amanda had been married for over 8 years and had 2 children. Their relationship then began to deteriorate, leading to their divorce. James moved to his sister's house, 20 km away from their family home, where Amanda and the children continued to live. As the divorce proceedings progressed over the following months, they encountered many difficulties regarding child custody and property division. The two then decided to start new chapters in their lives. James began dating a co-worker named Emmy, while Amanda pursued a relationship with Lamar, another co-worker from the sporting goods company. Even though the couple's relationship had completely broken down, James was still possessive of his ex-wife Amanda. He suspected that she was seeing someone new and called her several times to find out who it was. Amanda did not share the truth because she feared it would lead to serious problems. As a result, James became increasingly angry and aggressive. He called her frequently, becoming so intrusive that Amanda felt compelled to go to court to get a restraining order to protect herself. The weekend before the attack, Amanda's neighbor and close friend took a photo of a man mowing the lawn in front of Amanda's house. The man was identified as her new boyfriend, Lamar. When James found out, he tried to contact Amanda, insulting her and demanding to know who she was seeing. Amanda lied, claiming that the man in the photo was just a landscaper. James was going crazy because Amanda had found someone new. Early on the morning of August 27, he planned a terrible act. Surveillance cameras from nearby homes did not capture the moment James, her ex-husband, entered Amanda's house. This was not surprising, since he had lived there for a long time and was familiar with the areas not covered by the cameras. He approached the house undetected from the backyard, just as he had intended. The James entered the house around 3 a.m., but found it empty. Frustrated, he started to create chaos, throwing items around and dumping trash from the kitchen bins. He broke the TV and damaged several costly appliances. This destruction seemed aimed at upsetting Amanda. As he caused this damage, he was also getting ready for the terrible actions that were to come. James was looking for evidence that Amanda was having an affair with another man. Eventually, he discovered something that confirmed his suspicions and made him even angrier. At 4:00 a.m., he went to Mike's house, who lived across the street. James knocked loudly, shouted and swore, while discussing Amanda in an angry tone. Mike showed James everything he had found in Amanda's house, including some intimate toys that James had never seen before with his ex-wife. Mike knew that James had been given a restraining order prohibiting him from having access to his home or his ex-wife. However, James had violated the order. This could have resulted in a court hearing and possible arrest. Mike tried to calm James down by offering him a drink and suggesting that he go home and rest to avoid making any more impulsive decisions. Unfortunately, James ignored this advice and decided to go to court to resolve the issues related to his first restraining order violation. On the way, he called his father to tell him about the damage he had done to Amanda's home. His father reprimanded him and urged him not to be stupid again. James was arrested and charged with 2 counts of premeditated murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, robbery, and aggravated stalking for violating a court order. James maintained his innocence, claiming amnesia, and was taken to the county jail to await a hearing. The prosecution needed to prove that James attacked Amanda, her friends, and Lamar. Although there was no direct evidence linking him to the crimes, there were multiple witnesses present who confirmed that he was the perpetrator. Police pieced together James's movements on the day of the attack. James arrived at Mike's house around 4:00 a.m. and stayed with Mike until 4:45 a.m. After leaving, James went to his sister's house, where he lived with his sister and father, about 15 minutes from James's old home. After returning to his sister's house, he retrieved a gun and ammunition before committing the crime. Prosecutors alleged that the motive for the attack was a photo he had taken of Lamar at Amanda's house. Police searched James's cell phone and computer. They learned that at approximately 5:00 a.m., he began texting Amanda. He had tried to call her just 1 minute before the first gunshots and had called Amanda 22 times before that. Up until that point, Amanda had tried to avoid answering his calls, but after seeing the state of her house, she decided to pick up the phone. During the call, she accused James of robbing and vandalizing her house. Amanda had asked James to leave her alone. It was clear that she had done everything she could to avoid contact with James. She even suggested that she would keep quiet about his vandalizing her house if he would finally leave her life. The defense team is determined to fight the charges. They argue that James was prescribed medication to treat anxiety and depression, which was supposed to help him but when taken together caused unpredictable side effects. This reaction was made worse the night before the attack, especially after he had consumed beer and strong drinks. On the evening of August 26, after returning home, he took another medication that was supposed to help him sleep. He fell asleep but woke up a few hours later. The defense argued that the combination of the drugs he had taken and the alcohol had contributed to his uncontrollable behavior. However, James had plenty of time before the incident. The effects of these substances should have diminished, and he even attended the trial that morning without arousing any suspicion. After leaving the courthouse, he began calling and texting Amanda. Before arriving at his wife's house, he filled up his car with gas. The prosecutor's office believes this is a sign that he was preparing to flee the state, suggesting that he had planned ahead. During a search of the car, police found a shotgun, 2 handguns, and a large amount of ammunition of various calibers. These items were scattered throughout the vehicle, indicating that they had been hastily discarded. Police also found the same drugs that the defense had mentioned. The attorneys prepared expert witnesses in pharmacology and psychiatry to demonstrate that the combination of drugs James was taking could impair his ability to think rationally and make decisions. According to the attorneys, this impairment ruled out premeditated culpability, suggesting that James's actions could have been a spontaneous outburst of aggression beyond his control. The pharmacologist stated that the combination of these drugs was likely to cause amnesia. Therefore, James may not actually remember the incident. During police questioning, Mike provided detailed evidence of James coming to his house that morning. James was a bit strange. Mike knew that James was trying to cope with Amanda's new relationship after their divorce. Mike could not understand why James still wanted to possess her even though they were divorced. James became obsessed and sent pictures of Amanda's new boyfriend to her, which led to a tragic outcome. Police carefully examined text messages exchanged between James and Mike. It appeared that Mike was telling the truth. James harbored resentment not only toward his ex-wife, but also toward her friends. He specifically blamed Amanda's best friend, Lindy, for turning Amanda against him, which fueled his hatred for her. Evidence showed that James had collected a weapon just before leaving the house, the prosecutor's office said. Police also noted that James' father had tried to intervene and stop him from doing so, but his efforts were unsuccessful. The key witness for the defense was James's sister, Rhonda, who lived with him at the time. However, she was on vacation in Italy during the attack and returned 2 weeks later. Rhonda disputed the prosecutor's assertion that James was planning the attack. She believed that the 2 guns found in the car were there by chance, as she had been carrying them for a while. The defense argued that this indicated the attack was impulsive and unintentional. In contrast, the prosecution thought Rhonda was merely trying to defend younger brother, with whom she had always had a close relationship. The prosecution pointed out inconsistencies in Rhonda's testimony, especially regarding the type of handgun she reported having in the car. This raised the jury's suspicions. James faced the possibility of the death penalty for the assault. James's defense team aimed to reduce the severity of the sentence. The only sure way to spare James's life was to contest the premeditated murder charges, which could have carried a sentence of life in prison without parole. However, the prosecution was determined not to negotiate and refused to offer a plea deal. They argued that James, who had taken 2 lives and seriously injured 2 others, deserved the death penalty. The defense argued that James had no intention of harming Amanda or her friends. However, when he arrived at Amanda's home, an incident occurred that angered him. It is believed that there was an argument between the men, which may have caused James to start shooting. However, surviving witnesses, Rachel and Lamar, claimed that no conversation occurred and that no one provoked him. On the other hand, the prosecution argued strongly that James did not arrive at the home by accident. Instead, he returned to his sister's home to get weapons and ammunition for the murder, suggesting that his actions were premeditated. The key piece of evidence in the case was a phone call between James and Amanda that took place shortly before the shooting began. This call was played to the jury in court and lasted 14 minutes. During the conversation, Amanda attempted to end her relationship with James. She cried and begged him, trying to intimidate him by mentioning the restraining order and threatening to call the police if he continued to stalk her. It was clear that she had been enduring his harassment for a long time, but he paid no attention to her suffering. After both sides presented their arguments, the jury began deliberating their verdict. 2 hours later, they reached a unanimous decision, finding James Terry Colley, 38, guilty on all 7 counts, including burglary. However, the case was not over. 2 weeks later, the same jury reconvened to decide whether James should receive the death penalty. The defense team remained hopeful. They wanted to prove that the combination of drugs he had been taking could have caused side effects, such as memory loss. Experts, including a forensic psychiatrist and a pharmacist, supported this claim, arguing that James suffered from parasomnias, which meant he could not have been aware and could not remember the events that had occurred. Psychiatrists claim that people with parasomnias can walk, drive, and perform deliberate actions. However, the prosecutor's office has disputed these claims by presenting court records showing that James had been in court the morning before the attack. He had interacted with several people and there was no unusual behavior. James appeared calm, with no signs of slowing down, confusion, or depression, common signs of people with parasomnias. The prosecution successfully convinced the jury of James's guilt for causing the deaths of Amanda and Lindy. The jury unanimously decided that he should receive the death penalty. A third hearing then took place, where the court gave the defense one last chance to present any compelling evidence that might lead to a reduction in the death sentence. During this hearing, James took the stand for himself for the first time, describing the incident as a terrible accident. However, his argument lacked credibility. The defense attorneys also failed to present any substantial evidence, leading to James Terry Colley's death sentence being upheld. He is currently in prison, awaiting execution by lethal injection. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Amy Harwick. Amy Harwick was born in 1981. She was abandoned by her biological parents at the maternity hospital and was soon adopted by another family. She grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. At the age of 20, she moved to Los Angeles with plans to pursue a degree in psychology. However, because she needed money to make ends meet, she was unable to attend college right away. During the day, she worked as a bartender, and at night, she danced at nightclubs across the city. Over time, Amy saved enough money to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in clinical psychology, followed by a doctorate. She then opened a private practice and assisted clients who other professionals were unwilling to take on. Many of her clients included adult film actors and sex workers. According to her close friend, Robert Koshland, she developed a deep fascination with death. This is evident in her unusual collection of objects, such as a real coffin and a real collection of poisons in her home. In 2017, Amy met Drew Carey, a 60-year-old comedian and well-known TV host. On Valentine's Day, Drew introduced Amy as his girlfriend on his show. He shared that he met her at a party. It was 2017, and Amy was working part-time as a bartender. He was captivated by she and fell deeply in love. He admitted he had insecurities about his appearance but said that being with Amy made those insecurities disappear. Later that year, he and she got engaged. When he looked back on their relationship, Drew said that they had a great time together. However, as both Drew and Amy were well known in Los Angeles, negative anonymous comments about them began to surface online. She worried that this would negatively affect her reputation as a therapist. She suspected her ex-boyfriend, Gareth Pursehouse, was behind them, because he is very jealous when he sees her close to other men. After a while, her relationship with Drew suffered. They argued frequently, mainly over their employment contracts. Although they went to therapy together, it did not work. Eventually, they decided to divorce amicably and lost contact. In 2020, the night before Valentine's Day, Amy unexpectedly messaged Drew, saying that she would really like to meet him and talk. Drew responded that he wanted that too, and that he loved her. On the early morning of February 14, 2020, Amy scheduled to meet her friend, Cleopatra Slow, for a walk in Los Angeles. When Cleopatra arrived at her house, she invited Cleopatra in because she wasn't ready yet. They went up to her beautiful bedroom, which had a small balcony and plenty of natural light. She quickly got ready and ended up wearing only a red cardigan. During the walk, Amy played the role of a local guide, leading Cleopatra through the winding streets of the Hollywood Hills. She pointed out her favorite sights and shared stories about the area. They stopped for breakfast at the Beechwood Cafe, where Amy expressed how happy she was and how well her life was going. From the outside, it seemed like everything was perfect. That evening, Amy had plans to attend a burlesque show at the Globe Theater. She dresses very beautifully, choosing a beige velvet dress, a black leather jacket, boots, a handbag, and a rosary necklace with a cross. The show began around 7:00 p.m., and she met her friends there. The group took photos together using a small Kodak film camera. Around the same time, Amy's neighbor, Michael Herman, was in his room on the second floor. He suddenly heard the sound of breaking plates, which he assumed was Amy, who lived above him, making noise. He dismissed it and went back to sleep. Looking at the photos of Amy and her friends from that evening, they all appeared to be incredibly happy. Amy's friend Tosh later said that they had all been thrilled with the shows and had so much fun. Around 9:00 p.m., after the burlesque show ended, Tosh invited Amy to a party. Amy declined, saying that she was going to have tea with her friends, and added that she loved Tosh. That was the last time Tosh saw her. She and her friends left the Globe Theater and went to a place called the Nomad to relax and have tea. They stayed there until nearly midnight. Around 1:00 a.m., Amy drove home and messaged her friend Sarah Rollins, asking her to send photos from their time at the Nomad. In her message, sent at 1:02 a.m., she asked Sarah to send her photos on the green couch. Amy then went up the stairs to the third floor and entered her room. Suddenly, she was attacked. Her screams immediately woke her neighbor. The neighbor heard her body hitting the floor and uneven scream, indicating that someone had covered her mouth. So she started yelling to scare off the attacker. She then tried to get help but got trapped in her yard. Determined, she climbed over a high metal fence, injuring herself in the process. Reaching a nearby house, she banged on the door for help, but no one answered. Luckily, around 1:00 a.m., a man passed by and used his cell phone to call the police. When police arrived at 1:14 a.m., they found Amy lying in the yard below her bedroom balcony. She was alive but had difficulty breathing. She had severe injuries and bruises on her neck, indicating she had been choked before falling from the balcony. Meanwhile, at 2:05 a.m., Sarah, unaware of the situation, sent she a photo she had requested earlier. She was transported to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, but tragically, she passed away at 3:26 a.m. on February 15. Investigators found evidence of a violent struggle in Amy's home. Blood was found on the bedroom door, along with traces of the rosary beads she had been wearing earlier that evening. The trail stretched from the living room through the bedroom to the balcony, where a syringe filled with liquid was found. Since Amy did not smoke, drink, or use drugs, the syringe could not have belonged to her. It was left behind by the attacker. Soon after, Amy's close friends, Cleopatra, Gray Stanley, and Robert Koshland, received the heartbreaking news that 38-year-old Amy had passed away. At first, no one could believe that she was gone. Drew, Amy's ex-husband, learned of her death after the police finished interviewing witnesses at the scene. He was so distraught that he could not stand and burst into tears. In the aftermath, Many of Amy's friends began speculating about the identity of the perpetrator. They all strongly believed that it must have been her ex-boyfriend, Gareth Pursehouse. A close friend, Robert, went to the police station and informed them about Gareth, Amy's ex-boyfriend, whom she dated years ago. He was a software engineer, comedian, and photographer. According to Robert, he had repeatedly attacked she. The police discovered reports and 2 restraining orders that Amy had filed against Gareth. In one report from April 2011, she had written that he had thrown her to the ground, covered her mouth to stop her from screaming, and kicked her. In mid-May of the same year, she had filed another statement, saying that they had had several arguments, during which he had choked her, pushed her against the wall, thrown a pencil case to the ground, hit her head on the floor, and punched her. After these incidents, he would often apologize, express regret, and expressed his love for her. At the beginning of their relationship, Amy and Gareth seemed very different. She wanted a good, trustworthy partner. When she met Gareth, she believed he was the man of her dreams, charming, handsome, and athletic body. However, he soon began controlling her, forbidding her from seeing her friends. Over time, she realized he was abusive and reported his behavior to the police. Her friends disapproved of the relationship and encouraged her to leave him. Eventually, she decided to end things and, in 2012, told Gareth she no longer wanted to be with him. He did not take the breakup well and became obsessed with her. Gareth started following Amy, trying to figure out where she went and who she spent time with. He even asked their mutual friend, Notorious, to send her photos and love songs on his behalf. However, she had no interest in reconciling with him. On her YouTube channel, she posted videos about how to get over a breakup and gave helpful advice on the subject. She seemed to quickly forget him and became more radiant. 4 years later, an unknown intruder broke into her home and stole photo albums along with her computer. Amy suspected Gareth was involved, but there was no evidence to confirm it. Following this incident, she became anxious and often felt like someone was watching her. Over the years, she became convinced that the offensive comments she received online were from Gareth. He also messaged her friends, attempting to persuade them to cut ties with her. On January 16, 2020, Amy crossed paths with Gareth for the first time in 8 years. Amy, a psychotherapist, had been invited to the annual X-Biz Awards ceremony where Gareth was working. When he saw her, he became enraged. He shouted at her in front of about 100 people in the hall that she had ruined his life. His anger turned to sobs as he collapsed to the floor. She and he spoke privately for 45 minutes, under the supervision of security personnel. Later, Amy shared details of the encounter with her friend Robert. According to Robert, she told Gareth that he needed to move on with his life and stay away from conflicts. Although she believed she had calmed him down, she admitted that she was left feeling upset and uneasy. She told Robert that she wanted to share her phone location with him, saying that if anything happened to her, it would be because of Gareth. Concerned for her safety, she planned to purchase pepper spray and improve her home security. 2 weeks after the incident, Amy made an unexpected request to her family. She told them that if she died, she wanted to be buried in an open casket with a beautiful headstone. Just a day before Valentine's Day in 2020, Amy sent a message to Drew. He was glad to hear from her and looked forward to possibly seeing her again. However, this turned out to be their last communication. The tragic news of Amy's death soon shocked the nation. 13 hours after her death, detectives arrived at Gareth's home and charged him with her murder. At his residence, investigators found a syringe similar to one discovered on Amy's balcony. It was filled with nicotine liquid, which raised suspicions that Gareth planned to use it to kill Amy. In September 2021, a year and a half after his arrest, Gareth appeared in Los Angeles Superior Court for a preliminary hearing. Reporters were not allowed inside. Prosecutors discussed Amy's autopsy, which documented defensive wounds on her arms and hands, burst blood vessels around her eyes consistent with strangulation, and bruises on her neck. Evidence against Gareth included DNA matching his, found on Amy's door, her living room floor, and under her fingernails. The prosecution revealed that the struggle between her and him lasted about 6 minutes. During the hearing, the defense raised doubts about whether the evidence had been properly collected and tested, as well as whether Gareth had even been present at the scene that night. He denies all charges, and his lawyers claim that there is no evidence from the prosecution to prove that he was the one who caused the incident. They also argue that, even if he had been present at the scene, Amy's fall from the balcony could have been an accident. Amy's friend, Robert, claims that Gareth was responsible for the crime because he intended to kill her. Otherwise, he would not have been carrying a syringe filled with nicotine. While nicotine-related deaths are rare, there have been cases of such crimes, such as Paul Curry's conviction for poisoning his wife, Linda, with nicotine in 1994. Dr. Neil Benowitz, a renowned nicotine expert who authored a report on this case, explained, "If nicotine is taken orally or absorbed through the skin, it takes longer to act because the absorption process is slower. However, when injected intravenously, it can cause death within minutes." During the hearing, Amy's friends testified about her fear of Gareth and the measures she took to protect herself. These included installing a home security system, buying pepper spray, and allowing Robert to track her phone. After Amy's death, Robert accessed her email account and uncovered a critical piece of evidence, a letter written by Amy. In this letter, she described an encounter with Gareth at an XYZ Awards ceremony. She recounted that he had begun screaming, saying that she shouldn't be there and asking why she was there. He was sobbing, twitching his face upward, and shaking. Forensic psychologist Chris Mahandy commented on an email from Amy, stating that the email reflected what she had experienced. In the email, she wrote that what scared her was that Gareth had been obsessed with her for 9 years, that he was cruel and intentionally trying to hurt her. This message underscored that she would never have invited he to her home, as she wanted nothing to do with him and was deeply afraid of him. None of Amy's friends believed that she had accidentally or intentionally fallen from the balcony. Amy's close friend Grace Stanley testified at the trial and shared a text message in which Amy expressed concern about Gareth. Grace stated that she avoided texting he and always had a feeling that he was watching her. After 6 days of reviewing testimony, the judge determined there was sufficient evidence to arrest Gareth in connection with Amy's death. However, he was not charged with stalking. He denied responsibility for her death, although psychologist Chris Mahandy said if the allegations were true, he should have also faced stalking charges. The psychologist suggested that Amy likely showed Gareth sympathy, attempting to use words and psychological persuasion to influence him. Unfortunately, this was a serious mistake, as the safest approach for stalking victims is to avoid any interaction with their stalker. Her kindness was misinterpreted by Gareth, feeding his delusions and escalating his anger. Gareth was eventually arrested, but his preliminary court hearing was delayed multiple times, eventually rescheduled for October 25, 2020. If found guilty, he could face a life sentence without the possibility of parole. More than 2.5 years after Amy's death, Drew said that Valentine's Day will never be the same. He admitted that he's not sure if he wants to host dinner on the occasion again, and he really doesn't. He expressed his hope that her tragic death would raise awareness about domestic violence and stalking in other families. He noted that in this country, almost everyone knows at least one woman who has been a victim of domestic violence, and that it's a serious issue that many people don't fully understand. Gareth Pursehouse, Amy Harwick's ex-boyfriend, was sentenced to life in prison without parole on December 6, 2023. He was convicted of first-degree murder and first-degree burglary. The jury also determined that ambush was an aggravating factor in the case. Amy's parents have been incredibly appreciative of the outpouring of support and help from their daughter's friends. They are relieved that justice has been served and that Gareth has been held accountable. Meanwhile, Amy's friends are planning to create a memorial in her honor and for all victims of domestic violence. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case. The case of Anna Mariah Wilson. In May 2022, the cycling community was shocked by the shocking murder of rising star Anna. This is the result of jealousy, betrayal, and obsession. At the heart of the case was a volatile love triangle, her affair with Colin Strickland and his girlfriend, Caitlin Armstrong. What really happened that night in Austin, Texas, and what drove Anna to her tragic end? The case remains a chilling exploration of human emotions and how they can lead to acts of cruelty. From Anna's tragedy to the dramatic international manhunt, the case not only left a lasting impression, but also raised urgent questions about trust and justice. Anna Mariah Wilson was born on May 18, 1996 in Little Tony, New Hampshire. Her mother, Karen Wilson, was a cycling instructor, and her father, Eric Wilson, was a member of the U.S. ski team in 1977. With such parents, she was destined to make a career as an athlete. The family moved to Kirby, Vermont, a picturesque area with large mountains, ski resorts, and first-class preparatory schools specializing in training young athletes. Her father worked as a ski racing instructor at Burke Mountain Academy. At a young age, both Anna and her brother Matthew Wilson attended college where their father worked. Both were already experienced skiers, much to the delight of their parents, especially Anna. She seemed to have inherited the sporting genes passed on to her by her parents. She was not only a talented skier but also captain of football team and a promising gravel racer. This was her passion lay. For a short period of time, she not only participated in competitions, but also won races with amazing speed. Unfortunately, her bright future was destined to be cut short. On May 11, 2022, at about 10:00 p.m. in Austin, Texas, during a friend's 25th birthday celebration, Anna was found bleeding from her head, unconscious, and not breathing in the bathroom. It was not a freak accident, nor an attempt to take herself harm. She had been attacked twice in the head and once in the chest. In complete shock, her friend immediately called 911, trying to save Anna's life. First responders arrived on the scene as quickly as they could and immediately began performing CPR. But it wasn't long before they gave up. It was too late. Anna's fight for life was over. But what happened? What drove the attacker to so brutally take her life? Let's go back in time. In 2019, Anna graduated from Dortmund University with a degree in engineering. However, she wasn't planning on making a career as an engineer. She dreamed with all her heart of proving herself in sports. Within 2 years, she became a famous cyclist, rising up the rankings and sharing podiums with already established professional cyclists. She used to work in a company, but she soon quit to devote herself to cycling. Her career path consisted solely of training and competing. Anna became more famous and began to integrate more into the community of athletes and cyclists. She had many friends and new sponsors. One such person was Colin Strickland, 30-year-old experienced cyclist. He had a common sponsor with Anna. In October 2021, Anna visited Austin, Texas, where Colin lived. Soon as they came out of their previous relationships, Colin and Anna entered into a short-lived relationship. After, Anna returned to her home in California. Meanwhile, Colin got back together with Caitlin Armstrong, with whom he had previously dated. Caitlin, a 34-year-old yoga instructor and realtor. There was no animosity between Anna and Colin after their breakup. They remained friends and active members of the cycling community. However, a problem arose. Caitlin did not like Colin's continued communication with Anna. Although she was unaware of their previous involvement, Caitlin could not understand that their relationship was strictly platonic and professional. She began to take steps to prevent them from communicating with each other, blocking calls and deleting messages from Anna on Colin's phone. Colin did not want to part with Caitlin, fearing he would lose her. In an effort to ease the situation and in a strange way calm Caitlin down, he saved Anna's number in his phone under a different name. Perhaps he couldn't think of anything else, but it wasn't the smartest move on Colin's part. In January 2022, Anna and Colin took part in a cycling competition in Arkansas, and Caitlin accompanied them. This led to an awkward situation. Anna seemed unaware of the issues her friendship with Colin was causing. Although there was no overt conflict, the atmosphere was tense. The day after the event, Anna texted Colin asking what was happening between them. She mentioned that if Colin preferred to stay just friends, she was okay with that, but they needed to discuss it. From Anna's message, it appeared she was uncertain about their relationship, at least from her end. Things became even more complicated when Caitlin learned that Anna and Colin had a romantic history. Caitlin's friends said that she was extremely angry, with some saying she even threatened Anna, claiming would kill Anna. While such statements can be exaggerated in emotional moments and may not indicate actual intent, Caitlin felt her concerns were valid. Colin communicated with Anna during training, spent a lot of time with her at cycling competitions, and talked with her frequently. Since Caitlin was aware of their past relationship, she changed how she viewed the situation. To her, it seemed clear that Colin was cheating on her. This suspicion is further reinforced when she discovers that Colin has been hiding his messages with Anna under a fake name on his phone. Although Caitlin could have reacted impulsively, but she remained composed and took months to process everything. On May 10th, Anna returned to Austin for a bike ride called Gravel Locomotives and then stayed with a friend. Colin was also on the trip. He planned to go swimming with Anna on May 11th at 5:30 p.m. He misled Caitlin about his plans that evening. He picked up Anna from her friend's house, and they went swimming in a deep pool with a whirlpool as planned. After swimming, Colin and Anna had dinner at a poolside restaurant. He then dropped Anna off at her friend's house at 8:37 p.m. Colin sent Caitlin a text saying he had been asked to deliver flowers to a friend's house and was on his way home. He didn't wait for Anna to get home safely, assuming she would be fine. Just as Colin texted Caitlin, Anna's friend's doorbell rang, confirming her arrival. Of course, Caitlin didn't believe Colin's explanation about flower delivery. Curious about what Colin was really up to, Caitlin used a special app on her phone to track his location. She also found out where Anna was using the same app. This program is typically used for planning exercise routes, which can be shared and compared with other users. Additionally, it allows real-time tracking of someone's location, such as during a run or bike ride, or even to check on a partner suspected of cheating. At 8:37 p.m. that evening, Anna arrived at her friend's house to attend birthday. Around 10:00 p.m., her friend called 911 after finding Anna seriously injured from a brutal attack. The police immediately investigated this murder. Complicating the situation, the victim was from out of town. The police's first priority was to identify anyone in the area who knew Anna, and they quickly found leads. They asked Anna's friend if anything had been stolen, but there were no obvious signs of a burglary. The only notable thing missing was Anna's bicycle, which the police later discovered abandoned in some bushes nearby. The bike is quite valuable to a professional cyclist. However, if it was a burglary, why didn't the thief take the bicycle with him since nothing else was missing from the house? The police quickly concluded that the incident was not a failed burglary. Instead, it appears that the perpetrator had a personal grudge against the victim. Anna's friend, who had called 911, she was devastated by Anna's death, showed no signs of involvement, so the police ruled her out as a suspect. The investigation then turned to Anna's acquaintances in the area, specifically Colin and Caitlin. The police found out that Caitlin had a Class B warrant for her arrest. While this warrant was not for a serious crime, it was related to fraud. Caitlin had previously gone to a Botox clinic and, when it was time to pay, told the staff that her credit card was in her car. She left to get her credit card back, but never returned. The fraud was minor, totaling only $600, but it provided the police with a reason to bring Caitlin in for questioning about Anna's murder. Officer Wilson immediately believed that it was time for Caitlin to pay for her actions. She did not deny her wrongdoing, as she likely faced only a minor penalty, such as an apology and a fine. Caitlin's behavior changed dramatically when the police first asked her about her activities over the last 24 hours, and then inquired about Anna. When the mention of murder came up, her expression fell, and she sat frozen, clearly confused and unsure of how to respond. Despite her confusion, Caitlin attempted to explain her whereabouts, but her story was unconvincing. The investigator was noted that Anna's friend had a doorbell camera and security cameras around her house. One camera focuses on the front of the house, capturing part of the sidewalk and alley, with the view of passing cars and people. This footage became crucial. It showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee passing the house on May 11th, the same night Anna was killed. Caitlin was the one driving that vehicle. The police asked Caitlin to explain why she was in the area, but she couldn't provide a reason. She sat quietly, looking upset, with her arms crossed, avoiding eye contact, and rolling her eyes. Meanwhile, the police were speaking with Colin, who shared the entire story about his friendship with Anna and the complications that arose with Caitlin. The detectives described the situation as a love triangle involving Colin, Caitlin, and Anna. She had no alibi, but on the other hand, the police had made an administrative error in the arrest warrant, and what was worse, the police database had her date of birth incorrect. Because of this mistake, Caitlin was released. After leaving the police station, Caitlin quickly took action. She didn't want to wait for the police to show up at her door again, which she was sure would happen pretty soon. Caitlin booked a flight from Chile to New York, deleted all her social media accounts, and vanished. If someone wants to disappear, the vast and varied landscapes of the United States are ideal for that. New York, with its massive urban environment, offers the perfect cover. Any police search in such a large city would be like searching for a needle in a haystack. On May 14 at 12:30, Caitlin was seen on surveillance camera entering Austin International Airport. From there, she took a connecting flight to Houston and then transferred to another flight to LaGuardia Airport in New York. On May 17th, U.S. Marshals obtained a warrant for Caitlin Armstrong's arrest, which they had previously failed to execute. Very soon after that, on May 18th, she was spotted at LaGuardia Airport. However, Caitlin was using smaller, shorter domestic flights to evade law enforcement, successfully staying one step ahead of the police. On the day she arrived in New York, she obtained an ID under the name Christine Armstrong, which was her sister's name. At the time, not much was known about this sister. The authorities was believed that Christine did not live in New York, but was, in fact, in California. Getting an ID was a risky decision for Caitlin. The authorities now knew she was in New York, and the ID was linked to a relative with the same her last name. It was highly unlikely that her sister, who supposedly lived in California, would suddenly move to New York at the same time Caitlin was on the run. The police eventually obtained a copy of the ID issued to Caitlin, which listed her address as Camp Haven, a recreational area in Livingston Estate, New York. It has been 6 weeks since the search began, but there have been no leads. Colin also went into hiding, fearing that after he spoke out, Caitlin would return and harm him. Caitlin's sister, Tina Armstrong, also sought refuge. She avoided the media and never commented publicly about Caitlin. At this moment, Caitlin continued to evade contact with authorities, and the theory that she might be hiding at Camp Haven was eliminated. After many efforts, on June 29, 2022, U.S. federal agents and Costa Rican police surrounded the Santa Teresa nursing home. A joint task force entered the facility and quickly emerged with a woman dressed in black, her nose bandaged. She did not look at all like the pretty Caitlin who had long, lush red hair and bright eyes, but it was Caitlin. Authorities finally captured her. They discovered that Caitlin had left the U.S. via New York airport on May 18 at 8:00 p.m. using a fake passport. She had never been to Camp Haven. Instead, her strategy involved taking different flights to mislead the police, which worked perfectly. While the police searched New York, she arrived in San Jose, Costa Rica. Since Caitlin's arrest, many rumors and theories have emerged. A significant question is whether she acted alone or had accomplices. She led a comfortable life as a yoga instructor and realtor, but she was not wealthy. In under 50 days, she managed to book and pay for multiple flights within the U.S. and an international flight to Costa Rica. The bruises and bandages on her face indicate she likely underwent plastic surgery soon after arriving in Costa Rica. And this is expensive. Eventually, police discovered her black Jeep at a local car dealership. On May 13, Caitlin sold the car for $12,200. This partly explains why she is able to cover her expenses. However, $12,200 is not a substantial amount when trying to stay hidden, and it's doubtful it covered all her travel costs, living expenses, and surgery. Suspicion has shifted to her sister Christine. It's important to note that this is just a theory and not confirmed, as there is no definitive evidence about anyone's involvement, including that of her sister. The day after Caitlin arrived in New York, she obtained an ID using Christine's name. And when she was arrested, she had a copy of Christine's driver's license with her. Meanwhile, the day after Caitlin's arrival, Christine applied for a new driver's license, claiming hers was lost. Did she assist Caitlin in evading the authorities? There is no answer to this question yet. Another possibility is that Colin may have played a significant role in the case. Some people suspect a conspiracy involving Colin and Caitlin. They believe that Colin's text to Caitlin, sent just after he dropped Anna off at her friend's house, claiming he was delivering flowers, was actually a secret message about Anna's location. There is no evidence to support this theory. It remains speculation. Nonetheless, Colin has a questionable history of honesty. He concealed his relationship with Anna and changed her name in his phone to prevent Caitlin from discovering the truth. He also told the police that he and Caitlin had broken up before Anna arrived in town, and that Caitlin was fine with him dating others. If that was the case, why did he text Caitlin about his whereabouts, and why was she upset about Anna and Colin's friendship? Since Caitlin's arrest, police have been working hard to gather evidence. One key piece is ballistic evidence linked to a 9mm weapon that was purchased by Colin, not Caitlin. A man gave this weapon to her in January 2022, and investigators found it in her home. Detectives are also looking into the possibility that someone from another country helped Caitlin. After her deportation, law enforcement held a press conference discussing how quickly she managed to escape and catch multiple flights between airports. Additionally, she possessed a passport that did not belong to her. On July 21, 2022, Caitlin participated in her first online trial, where she pleaded not guilty to first-degree murder. In October 2022, she attended a second hearing to determine if she could be released while waiting for a jury trial. Various options were discussed, but Caitlin remained confident that she would confront a grand jury regarding the murder charges, insisting on her innocence. She will stay in the Travis County Jail until her trial. According to her lawyer, prosecutors are hesitant to take the case to trial, citing a lack of evidence for a conviction. The defense argues that the officers involved were inexperienced and did not properly act on information about Caitlin's ex-boyfriend. They also pointed out that Caitlin's and Colin's home was vandalized the night Anna was killed, questioning why this was not investigated thoroughly and who may have been responsible for the crime. The defense is arguing that the police were incompetent in their investigation. They believe law enforcement is trying to cover up mistakes and misconduct related to the case. The court hearing was scheduled for a week after the bail hearing, but the defense has since filed a motion to suppress evidence obtained by police, claiming that Caitlin was not read her rights. They argue that this invalidates the evidence, including her initial arrest tied to a Botox clinic. As a result, the judge has paused the trial while considering these motions, and a new pretrial date is set for June 22, 2023, although it has not yet been fully confirmed. A few months later, Caitlin Armstrong was sentenced to 90 years in prison for the murder of Anna Mariah Wilson. The sentence was handed down on November 17, 2023, after she was convicted by a Texas jury the day before. Caitlin was convicted of attacking Anna 3 times in May 2022, motivated by jealousy over Anna's previous relationship with her boyfriend Colin. Anna, a rising star in the professional cycling scene, was shot and killed in Austin, Texas. Investigation reveals disturbing links between Caitlin Armstrong, Cloyne, and Anna. Caitlin's jealousy led her to commit murder. Her trial ended in November 2023, resulting in a guilty verdict and a 90-year prison sentence. Although the case has been closed, the details surrounding Anna's death continue to cause debate. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Rachel Moran. Rachel Moran was born in Ireland in 1982, when she was only 6 months old. Her family moved to Hull, Humberside, UK. She is the youngest of 4 children, and was known to be well-behaved and studious from a young age. Rachel is passionate about music and dance, especially ballet. She often spends time with her family, although she has many friends. After graduating from high school, Rachel decided to go to medical school and start building her career. During this time, she met a younger man named Mark, and they quickly began dating. They soon decided to move in together, but Rachel requested that they live close to her family home so she could visit often. They found an apartment just a few miles away from her family home and rented it. At the age of 21, Rachel used her talent to join a dance group to earn extra income. She also worked part-time as a kindergarten teacher. One of her dreams was to become a chef, so she started baking to develop her cooking skills. At the end of 2002, she decided to further her education by enrolling in cooking courses that would help her achieve her dream. Her studies began in January 2003. During this time, Rachel was dating Mark. They considered marriage and having children but felt it was too soon. They wanted to focus on their education and careers first. On Tuesday, December 31, 2002, people across Great Britain were getting ready to celebrate the New Year, including Rachel and her boyfriend. Mark suggested they go to a bar with friends on New Year's Eve, but Rachel preferred to stay with her family. Mark didn't want to join her, so they agreed that he would stay home to look after the 2 kittens they had just adopted. Rachel then went to her parents' house in North Hall Hold and spent New Year's Eve with her family. On New Year's Eve, Rachel called Mark to wish him a Happy New Year, but he didn't answer his home phone. She then tried calling his cell phone, but a close friend answered. There was loud music and partying in the background. The friend explained that he and Mark had gone to a party at home. Rachel was upset because this meant their kittens were home alone. Soon after, Mark's phone battery died. She wanted him to come back and look after the kittens, but since she couldn't reach him, she decided to go check on them herself. Her mother Wanda saw her leave and became worried, not wanting her to be alone at such a late hour, especially in bad weather and with people drinking on the street. Rachel convinced her mother to let her go out, promising to call Wanda in about 20 minutes when Rachel got back to the apartment. Her mother waited for the call, but when the 20 minutes had passed, she began to worry. First, she tried Rachel's cell phone, but it was turned off. Next, she called the home phone, but no one answered. Thinking that Rachel might have gone to find Mark, the Wanda managed to calm herself for a bit. However, as time went on, over 2 hours passed since Rachel had left home, and there was still no news. This was unusual for Rachel. The Wanda was increasingly anxious and jumped in surprise when the home phone rang. Unfortunately, it was her other daughter calling to wish her a Happy New Year. The Wanda shared her concerns, and they all tried calling Rachel again, but her mobile phone remained silent. When they called the home phone again, they noticed the line was busy. This was a small relief, as it indicated that someone was using the phone, suggesting Rachel had returned home safely. 5 minutes later, Rachel's mother called her back. Mark answered the phone and explained that he had been out all night. He had just returned to the apartment and was getting ready for bed after calling a friend. He had no idea that Rachel had returned to their home. Rachel was not at the apartment, and Mark did not notice anything unusual in the apartment except that the kittens were very hungry, which indicated that Rachel had not returned to feed them. This made Wanda extremely worried, and she feared that something terrible had happened to her daughter. Rachel's family quickly went to the apartment and confirmed Mark's story. Worried, they immediately went to the local police station to report Rachel missing. Police asked her family if this had ever happened before, but the Wanda was adamant that Rachel had never run away from home before, and that she did not have any mental health issues. She had kept away from people who could cause her trouble, so there was no reason for her to run away. After speaking with family members, the police recognized the seriousness of the case. Over 10 police officers joined the search operation, thoroughly examining every location along the route the Rachel was expected to take that night, yet they still had no leads on what had happened. Police spoke with the last people who saw Rachel, including her mother and brother. The Wanda recalled a man who had passed by them as she stood at the door trying to convince Rachel not to go out so late. The man was walking in the same direction as Rachel, which led police to search for clues about a man while continuing to search for Rachel. The police interviewed Mark. They believed that on the night of Rachel's disappearance, there may have been a disagreement between them because Mark left the kitten home alone and went to a party without her. However, Mark denied this, saying that he did not see Rachel that night and that they did not have an argument. Although he believed that Rachel may have been upset, he insisted that he was not home on New Year's Eve and had been with friends the entire time. Mark was extremely worried about Rachel's disappearance and felt guilty for leaving the house, fearing that it would put her in danger. Mark still actively helped to search for her. His actions did not arouse any suspicion, and after verifying his alibi, all suspicions against him were cleared. After the police checked with people Rachel might have known, they did not find any suspicious people who could have staged the kidnapping or attack. Her friends were known to be trustworthy. Therefore, the police concluded that she had been kidnapped or attacked by someone she did not know well. After several days, the police did not see any activity on Rachel's bank cards and noticed that she had not used her mobile phone. A search of Rachel and Mark's apartment also yielded no clues. At the beginning of the investigation, police reviewed footage from city surveillance cameras to determine what happened on New Year's Eve. During the search, they analyzed the recordings and were able to track Rachel as she walked toward her apartment. This helped them pinpoint a specific area that was the route she may have been attacked. With this information, the search efforts focused on a smaller area. They deployed helicopters, dogs, mounted police, and a team of divers. This was a difficult time for Rachel's family, who still held out hope that she was alive. However, the actions of the search team showed that they were more focused on finding a body than a living person. On January 1, 2003, a dive team began searching a canal known for dumping waste. They discovered sneakers similar to the ones Rachel had worn at her mother's house. This prompted a more extensive search of the site. The divers discovered a woman's handbag. Inside the bag, they found Rachel's cell phone, a cosmetic case, and an Irish passport that belonged to her. The police believed that the objects found were intentionally discarded, indicating that someone wanted to ensure they would never be discovered. This led them to conclude that Rachel was likely no longer alive. Their suspicions were reinforced by the total lack of communication from the suspected kidnappers. No ransom had been requested, and they had not provided any information about Rachel to her parents. With very little information available, the police decided to retrace Rachel's last known movements. At the same time, they gathered details to share with journalists in hopes of generating public interest in the case. They provided thorough descriptions of Rachel's clothing, her photographs, and the route she was last seen taking, including the exact time and her home address. They hoped this would help attract the attention of anyone who might have noticed something unusual, especially in relation to the man described by Rachel's mother. Some of the witnesses at the police station on New Year's Eve were unfortunately intoxicated, which clouded their memories and made them unreliable, hampering the investigation. Meanwhile, the police had access to new surveillance cameras, one of which was located on a school building, just outside Rachel's usual route. The footage showed a silhouette resembling Rachel, placing her less than 200 meters from her apartment. Furthermore, she had changed her usual route. Instead of taking the well-lit central streets, she turned into the dark side streets of a nearby residential area. Then, in the video, a second figure suddenly appears and quickly approaches Rachel from behind. The footage does not show what happened when they met. It is possible that this figure was the criminal who attacked her. The police knew that murder victims were usually found within a few kilometers of the scene of the attack. Therefore, they decided to expand the search area to a 3-kilometer radius from Rachel's house. The search involved over 100 police officers, making it one of the largest operations ever conducted by the Humber Police. Every street was thoroughly searched, but no evidence was found. A crucial decision was made. The team would not only search the area, but also search homes within a 3-kilometer radius. Although the chances of finding Rachel alive were very low, on January 28, 2003, more than 100 police officers set out to search for Rachel. They formed small search teams. A few hours later, a member of a search team contacted the station to report that they had found a man's house just a short distance from Rachel's apartment. When the police checked the house, there was a man who claimed that he lived there with a friend. Their house was very dirty and untidy, and it seemed like he never cleaned it because there was a foul smell inside. Initially, there was no sign of Rachel, but the police noticed a large wardrobe. When they asked the tenant for the key, he said that he had lost it. He then changed his story, saying that he had given the key to an old friend who used to live with him. After a while, his story changed again, and he said that he had given the key to his mother. The police found this strange. Why didn't the owner of the wardrobe have the key? It seemed like a lie and aroused suspicion. Finally, the police asked him to find the key. When the closet door was opened, a large amount of rubbish was removed, including carpets, boxes, bags, and other debris. After 4 weeks of searching, the mystery of Rachel Marin's disappearance was solved when her decomposing body was found in the closet, wrapped in bin bags. The apartment where her body was discovered was only 100 meters from her home. 2 young men who lived there were quickly arrested on suspicion of murder. One of them, 20-year-old Michael Little, was living as a homeless person, while his friend immediately denied any involvement, claiming that he had not used the apartment for a long time. He insisted that he had no idea there was a body there. His claim was backed up by the fact that he had moved to another location a long time ago and had never been to the apartment. Then attention turned to Michael Little. During the investigation, police discovered a suspicious notebook containing some disturbing notes, but his notes lacked specific details about any actual wrongdoing. Michael, the murder suspect, claimed that he saw Rachel walking alone at night and invited her to his house for a drink. Rachel was his neighbor, and they were friends. According to Michael, Rachel accepted his invitation. After they entered the house, Rachel and Michael drank and talked for a while, and then an argument broke out. Michael admitted that he tried to calm things down by leaving the room and leaving Rachel in the kitchen. However, when he returned, he saw her holding a knife, and she stabbed him with it. To prove this, he showed a long-healed scar on his hand. Frightened, Michael attacked Rachel, took the knife from her, and in a fit of rage killed her. He claimed that it was self-defense, but this argument seems unconvincing since his wound was much older. Police interviewed people close to Michael. Several witnesses revealed that he attended a party with friends that night, where he talked about confessing his love to a blonde girl he had feelings for. Most did not know who she was, but believed she likely rejected him. Michael left the party around midnight and said he went home. The police then traced Michael's route, which matched the area where Rachel had been walking. They also gathered a description of the clothes he was wearing that night, which matched the appearance of a stranger seen on surveillance footage running toward Rachel before she was murdered. Rachel's family believes that she could not have acted as Michael described. First, Rachel would never have gone to a stranger's house to drink. Second, she was desperate to get home to her kittens and would not have wasted time visiting someone she did not know. Rachel also did not drink, and most importantly, she would never have used a knife in a domestic dispute. Her family believes that Michael was lying. The police needed to establish that Michael's communication with Rachel was not voluntary. They had to prove he had either lured her or forced her to his apartment. To gather evidence, the police continued reviewing footage from the city's CCTV cameras. They had previously found a clip showing Michael walking in front of Rachel, but other videos revealed him approaching her from behind. This suggested that he had spotted her and may have hidden to ambush her, which supported the suspicion of kidnapping. Meanwhile, the autopsy results were in. The forensic expert determined that Rachel had suffered a brutal attack, with 27 stab wounds, primarily on the back of her head and neck. A large kitchen knife was used in the assault. She was likely attacked from behind, as there were no signs of defensive wounds on her arms or body. In Michael's apartment, police found the Rachel's blood, and dirt on her legs suggested she had been dragged through the grass. This pointed to the conclusion that the attack occurred on the street. He likely attacked Rachel and took her to his apartment. The autopsy revealed evidence of abuse. Despite the clear evidence of abuse, the prosecutor's office chose not to charge Michael with that crime. Instead, they charged him with premeditated murder. Michael often spent time by the window and had few friends. He watched Rachel every day as she passed by his house on her way to her parents' house. All of Michael's friends knew about his unusual fantasies and unhealthy obsession with Rachel, whom he constantly watched. According to Michael's friends, he would spend hours looking at her from the window and often mentioned her in conversation. Michael claimed to have a girlfriend, but everyone knew this was a lie. His imaginary girlfriend resembled Rachel in many ways. While he was in prison, his story changed again. He said that Rachel approached him on the street, asking him to walk with her to his house because she was afraid of getting into trouble. When they got to his apartment, they argued. She allegedly tried to attack him, prompting Michael to hit her on the back of the head. He then lost control and, fearing for his life, stabbed her to death. The story contradicted the evidence police had gathered. There was no reason to believe that Rachel, who barely knew him, would approach him or act aggressively. Police learned about Michael Little's personality. He was a troubled teenager who faced bullying at school. Overweight and socially isolated, he endured ridicule that had a profound effect on him. With virtually no friends, he interacted mainly with his younger sister, which also made him a target for ridicule. His father had abandoned the family, and Michael revealed that he had been abused by his stepfather throughout his childhood. The only people he had a good relationship with were his mother and sister. Michael grew up in several public housing apartments. Neighbors saw Michael spend most of his time at home using illegal drugs and frequently watching adult films. One of his classmates noted that when Michael was angry, he became aggressive and unpredictable, revealing his darker side, which often led to trouble. On January 31, 2003, Michael Little was charged with first-degree murder. He claimed that he acted in self-defense. He accused Mark Fuller, who had previously lived in the same house with him, of murder, although Fuller had previously been cleared of all suspicion. Michael claimed that Fuller's alleged motive was jealousy. He was angry that Rachel had taken a liking to Michael. Michael explained that his earlier confession to the murder was the result of threats from Fuller, who had threatened to kill him and his family if he did not confess. In court, Michael also claimed that he had been forced to clean up the blood and hide the body. This information needed to be verified. Fuller then underwent another round of questioning, during which he continued to maintain his innocence in Rachel's death. The police reviewed the evidence and confirmed that Fuller had an alibi. As a result, they were once again unable to charge him. Michael was trying to shift the blame to someone else. His lies ultimately strengthened the prosecution's case. The injuries on Rachel did not match the description he had given, in which he had always claimed that he was the victim of Rachel's attack. After both the prosecution and defense presented their cases, the jury deliberated for 9 hours. The jury then found Michael Little guilty of first-degree murder. A jury later found Michael Little guilty of first-degree murder. Michael was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 25 years. After Rachel's death, Ray Moran. Her father fell into a deep depression, while her mother began to suffer from health problems. Rachel's relatives believed that Michael had no remorse for his actions, as he tried to blame others for his crimes. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Chad Ensel. Chad was born and raised in Bismarck. He attended university, majoring in mechanical engineering and design. Upon graduation, he returned to Bismarck and began working as an engineer at a local company. Friends and acquaintances describe him as a simple and kind man. In addition to his engineering work, Chad is a coach for a youth baseball team. On weekends, he spends time coaching young athletes and playing sports. He always remains calm and is not someone who likes to cause trouble. His cheerful personality does not seem like someone who is suffering from mental problems or who is thinking about quitting life. On April 6, 2015, Chad shared on social media that he was dating a woman named Nikki, who is 3 years older than he is. Friends noted that he seemed very happy at that time. A year later, in 2016, they got married. Nikki had 2 teenage sons from a previous relationship and worked in transportation for a food company. She was confident and often posted selfies on her social media, with only a couple of photos featuring her sons. She has an erratic temperament and often expresses her frustration with store employees. This causes a lot of conflict, causing many people to choose to avoid communicating with her. In addition to her main job at a food company, Nikki also runs a small business that specializes in catering for events and celebrations, particularly in making sweets and baked goods. She has been successful in this field, with many appealing creations showcased on her social media pages. On the outside, she and Chad appear to be a successful couple. He works at a large company in a managerial position, while she balances her job at the food company with running her own business. They raised 2 children together, and everything seemed to be going smoothly until January 2, 2020, when Nikki had to call emergency services. At approximately 5:30 p.m. on January 2, 2020, 911 emergency services received a call. The incident took place 15 minutes from Bismarck, North Dakota, at a farmhouse surrounded by cornfields. The caller's name was Nikki. She said she had been unable to contact her husband, Chad, for several days and decided to visit him. However, when she arrived, she could not enter the house because it was filled with smoke. She couldn't see what was happening inside but believed her husband was there. Emergency responders, including paramedics, firefighters, and police officers, quickly arrived to help. Upon investigation, they discovered that the fire had started in the guest bedroom on the 2nd floor, where Chad was thought to be. Firefighters swiftly extinguished the flames and later found the charred body of a man lying on the bedroom floor. He was completely naked and had some sort of weapon placed on the bed, but away from his reach. This suggests that someone moved the weapon there, as it was not possible for him to have injured himself and then moved the weapon on his own. Police quickly determined that Chad had inflicted the injuries on himself. However, the lack of burns from a weapon suggested that the injury was likely caused by a distant impact. It could have been caused by a gas heater, which is known to be a dangerous source of heat that can cause fires. Despite the risks, gas heating systems remain popular in the United States due to their affordability and convenience. When the police arrived at the basement, they found another source of ignition, a badly burned stove on the lower level. The stove may have overheated during use and become the starting point for the fire. The entire situation was riddled with inconsistencies. The crime scene looked like a poorly staged incident. The strange points in this case are becoming more and more clear. Chad and Nikki lived together and raised their children together. So why is she away from home for many days? This caught the attention of the police, who began questioning people close to the family. Chad's friends and co-workers said they had not seen him for days. This was strange because he was a department head and did not usually miss work. Chad was very responsible, so it was unusual for him to miss work. At the very least, he would have called his supervisor to let them know he could not come in. Concerns grew. Chad was last seen on December 30, 2019, when he was captured on surveillance cameras at a local bowling alley. The next day, he did not show up for work. His wife, Nikki, called the company to inform them that her husband was seriously ill and needed a few days to recover. January 1 was a holiday, but on Monday, everyone at the company expected him to return. Yet he did not appear. Co-workers decided to call Chad to check on him. However, they were unable to reach him, prompting them to call the police to report the situation. They subsequently requested a welfare check on him. At approximately 1:20 p.m. on January 2, 2020, the police arrived at Chad's home. They knocked on the door, but no one answered. After waiting for a while and looking through the windows, they saw nothing unusual. The house was quiet. They did not conduct a thorough search or enter the home, believing they did not have the authority to do so. They assumed he had gone out to celebrate the holidays. They reported back to Chad's company that he was not home and that they could not assist further. They then left. Chad's co-workers suspected something was wrong, so they contacted his wife, Nikki. She stated that she was at work, but promised to check on him as soon as she got off. At 5:30 p.m., she called 911 and reported that she could not enter the house due to a strong smell of smoke, particularly in the room where Chad's body was found. Forensic scientists uncovered clear signs of arson. A mattress had been burned, possibly by a nearby gas heater. There were cigarette butts and empty whiskey bottles on the floor. However, the police were particularly puzzled as to why Nikki and the children were not home under the circumstances. Why had she and Chad not seen each other for several days? Detectives invited Nikki in for questioning to gather more information about the case. She was deeply affected by her husband's death and expressed her distress, mentioning that he often smoked inside their home, which she suggested might have caused the fire. Her testimony made investigators suspicious. They believed that her husband's death was not an accident, but a deliberate murder, so they continued to question her. Nikki then explained why she had been absent from home, stating that the stove had broken down, and she had to temporarily stay in a hotel because she couldn't stand the cold. However, the strange thing was that the children were not with her or Chad, but living with her mother. During her account of the events, she unexpectedly mentioned that she had to move the children because Chad, her husband, was a cruel alcoholic. She had never mentioned anything negative about him before, only positive things. However, she now stated that both she and the children had been abused by him. She had many photos showing the bruises and injuries her husband had caused. She admitted to the police that she and her children had moved away to escape her abusive husband. Nikki found a job in a new place and was preparing to move in a week. However, her plans changed drastically with the death of her husband. Now that she had no need or reason to run away, she decided to stay. At that time, the investigators had no evidence against Nikki, so they released her, but continued to treat her as a suspect. The next day, the autopsy results came back. Forensic experts discovered that Chad had suffered severe facial injuries from a weapon, and the entire front half of his body had been burned. He was lying on his back when the fire broke out, which resulted in less burn damage to his back, where experts found bullet marks. Obviously, he couldn't have injured himself in the back with that bullet, and if he had intended to end his life, there would have been much simpler ways. The cause of death was determined to be injuries from a weapon, and Chad had died before the fire broke out. There was no soot in his airways, and the forensic expert concluded he had been dead for several days, meaning he could not have ignited the fire. It was clearly not his doing. Someone murdered him and tried to make it look like he took his end life. With these details, Nikki became the prime suspect. Nikki contacted her insurance company to claim compensation for the damage to her property after the fire. Investigators discovered that just days before the fire, on December 26, the family had registered their home with the insurance company. Less than a week later, the house burned down under suspicious circumstances. Furthermore, during the police investigation of the crime scene, they discovered a package in the kitchen addressed to a man named Earl Howard. This new suspect needed to be investigated, and he was found quickly. In her initial interrogation, Nikki claimed she had rented a hotel room. However, it was later revealed that the room was registered to Earl Howard, the man named on the package. He was an ordinary working man who spent most of his free time at home. Originally from Canada, he had moved to Bismarck, North Dakota, USA, for a job opportunity. Soon after, Nikki was taken back to the police station for questioning again. The detectives began asking her leading questions about Earl. Initially, she denied knowing him, but then she unexpectedly admitted to having a relationship with him. She claimed that they had been having an affair for a year, that Chad knew about it and accepted the situation. She then maintained a relationship with Earl. During this time, her alcohol consumption increased, and she faced frequent insults from Chad. Throughout the interrogation, Nikki portrayed herself as a victim. She cried often, but sometimes spoke so softly that the police had to ask her to raise her voice. Experienced detectives suspected she was being insincere and was merely trying to evoke sympathy. After being pressured, her attitude changed, and she stopped crying. She realized that tears could not convince the detectives, so after being advised, she continued to tell the story clearly. Nikki finally provided details about the incident that led to Chad's death on the evening of December 30. That evening, he went to his favorite bowling alley and played for a few hours, then went home. At that time, Nikki was at a hotel with her lover, Earl. She planned to return home later that evening to gather her belongings before their trip to Texas. When she got to their house, she found Chad drunk and he started abusing her again. He physically attacked her, and she stated that during such moments, she would simply leave. However, Nikki then shifted the conversation to more abstract topics. She expressed frustration about Chad's drinking and gambling losses. The investigator had to press her again to continue answering questions. Unexpectedly, she revealed that she had returned home that night not alone, but with her lover, Earl. Chad was clearly upset by this and started yelling at her, prompting her to leave the house. Nikki claimed to have heard a heated argument and a struggle between Earl and Chad, followed by a bang. However, she did not ask Earl what happened. According to Nikki, they simply got into the car and drove away in silence. At this point, Nikki wrote a confession and placed it on the table. Then she decided to tear the paper. However, the detective quickly grabbed the confession from her hands. This action further aroused suspicion, leading the police to conclude that Nikki was involved in the death of her husband, Chad. Furthermore, while investigating the crime scene at Chad's home, detectives found a surveillance camera. They retrieved the video footage, which revealed crucial information. Earl and Nikki arrived at the house around 10 p.m. on December 30, approximately half an hour before Chad left the bowling alley. They went inside and spent about 20 minutes in the house before coming out with several boxes. This was important evidence, as it indicated that Nikki was at the crime scene before Chad's return. Detectives theorized that she was potentially removing her possessions to protect them from a planned fire, which enabled them to charge her with premeditated involvement. It was important to fully restore the evidence, as the circumstantial evidence alone could seem unconvincing to the jury. After this, Chad returned home around 10:30 p.m., seemingly unaware that Nikki and Earl had been at their house. Just before 1 a.m., Nikki and Earl returned to the house. They went inside, and shortly after, nearly all the security cameras stopped recording. Only one camera, which monitored the driveway, continued to operate. This limited footage did not capture everything that occurred afterward. They eventually left the house and drove away. Cigarettes found inside matched those smoked by Earl, but none were fully smoked. They appeared to have been lit and then carelessly discarded on the furniture and floor, creating a fire hazard. This suggested a deliberate setup. Moreover, it was revealed that Nikki was the sole beneficiary of the house insurance policy, valued at $26,000. She was arrested on January 7 for conspiracy to commit murder. Although her bail was set at $500,000, she could not afford it and remained in jail. Additionally, Nikki had 3 previous convictions for fraud and was on house arrest at the time of her arrest. Investigators went to Earl's house to arrest him and take his statement, but he fled. However, he was not able to evade justice for long. 2 days later, he was arrested in Michigan, near the Canadian border. He was trying to escape to his home country to avoid prosecution in the United States. When arrested, he did not resist. After the arrest, police gathered more information from him, which helped clarify the incident of that night. Nikki and Earl had more motives for committing the crime than just collecting an insurance payout on the house. Their relationship lasted for over a year. At one point, she shared with Earl that Chad had a $600,000 life insurance policy. They believed that this money could solve their problems and allow them to live comfortably. She wanted to avoid the complications of divorce and the division of assets, so she chose a darker and more lucrative option. They planned to kill Chad and make it appear that he took his end life. Their goal was to collect all the insurance money they could, both life and property, and then run away to Texas together. On December 9th, they finalized their plan and set it into motion. To prevent her children from witnessing the crime, Nikki sent them to stay with their grandmother. Knowing that Chad was going bowling that night, Nikki went to their home early to gather belongings she wanted to save from a fire. CCTV footage from the hotel captured her and Earl bringing their items to their room. Later, they returned to the scene of the crime, where Nikki disabled the cameras and the security system. Earl was armed, but it is unclear who actually killed Chad, as they blamed each other. Apparently, the murder happened while Chad was sleeping. He was attacked in the back. He died instantly. Then his body was turned upside down and his face was attacked to make it appear that he had injured himself. Earl and Nikki thought that burning the house down would destroy all evidence, making it difficult for forensics to find any clues. They then scattered whiskey bottles around the house to portray Chad as a heavy drinker. Finally, they put a gas heater in the room, lit it, and left, expecting it to cause a fire. The following day, they anxiously awaited news of the incident, but nothing came. Frustrated, they returned to the house and discovered some small, weak fires that had already gone out. To ensure a more effective blaze, they rearranged the mattress and other items to facilitate burning. Earl went down to the basement and started a fire directly above the stove. Meanwhile, Nikki scattered cigarettes around the room, believing their plan would succeed. They left, but for the next 2 days, there was no news about the fire. Fearing their plan had failed, they returned to the scene. On January 2 at 5 p.m., when Nikki opened the door, a backdraft caused the fire to flare up. However, their plan failed, as the house did not burn down as they expected. During the investigation, detectives discovered fingerprints and DNA evidence from both Nikki and Earl. The poor staging of the scene was quickly discovered. Even the placement of the weapon on the bed suggested an attempt to mislead the investigation. If Chad injured himself, the weapon wouldn't be placed that way. This detail became a key argument for the prosecution at trial and was persuasive to the jury. Nikki and Earl were charged with murder. At the last minute, Earl agreed to a plea bargain, which allowed the prosecution to learn all the details of the crime. Earl Howard pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit arson and tampering with evidence. As a result, he received a 25-year prison sentence, with the possibility of parole after serving 21 years. During the trial, he and Nikki blamed each other. Earl's plea deal included testifying against Nikki. In contrast, she maintained her innocence, claiming she was outside when the shooting occurred and that Earl was the shooter. She also accused Earl of lighting fires and throwing away cigarettes. During a subsequent interrogation, Nikki told bizarre stories, claiming that Chad was aware of her affair and had allowed her to meet Earl. She also stated that Earl and her husband were friends. Nikki described her husband as an alcoholic, but those close to the family disagreed, stating that Chad did not drink heavily, did not abuse Nikki, and would not permit her to be with Earl. Chad never made anyone doubt his character. No one had ever seen him drunk, and he always prioritized his family, career. Therefore, no one believed that he was a bad husband. They thought Nikki had fabricated the stories right away. On February 17, 2023, Nikki Ensel was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, arson, and attempting to cover up the crime. On March 16, 2023, she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 36 years, plus an additional 15 years for arson. The sentence was controversial, as Nikki's punishment was harsher than Earl's, despite evidence that he played a key role in the crime. The disparity in sentencing was attributed to Earl admitting guilt and cooperating with the investigation, while Nikki did not. However, the court's decision was final, allowing her to file her first appeal as early as 2026. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Suzanne von Richthofen. The von Richthofen family is very wealthy and resides in the suburbs of São Paulo. Their mansion, located in the Brooklyn neighborhood, is valued at around $480,000. The home features multiple living rooms and bedrooms, as well as swimming pools, an office, and a large library. The entrance is defined by large gates, while the entire property is surrounded by a high brick fence. This fence is decorated with unique ornamental stones and plants to ensure privacy. The villa is owned by Manfred von Richthofen, a German engineer and director of Dursa, a large company that oversees highways and roads in the São Paulo area. His wife, Mauricia, is a local psychiatrist. They met while Manfred was studying civil engineering at the University of São Paulo, and they reportedly fell in love at first sight. Mauricia is known for her sociable and friendly demeanor, while Manfred is recognized for his quiet and gentle personality. They married and welcomed their first child, a girl named Suzanne, in 1983. 4 years later, they had a son named Andreas. The two children, Suzanne and Andreas, grew up in a wealthy family and attended the best schools in the city. Suzanne is described as a shy girl and was a dutiful daughter, maintaining a good relationship with her younger brother. Throughout her childhood, she learned 3 languages. After graduating from a German high school, she pursued a law degree at the University of São Paulo. Suzanne aspires to have a successful career, but she doesn't have to worry about finances because her parents are rich. Their family is estimated to be worth around $17 million, and it has been reported that Suzanne's father, Manfred, has around $10.7 million in a Swiss bank account, which is intended to be transferred to her after she graduates. Suzanne had a peaceful childhood and a good education, which may have helped her become a good person. However, her relationship with her parents began to shift. At the age of 18, she began to think more about love than money. In 1999, the family attended an airplane model exhibition. There, Andreas met Daniel Cravinhos, a 19-year-old skilled model builder. Eager to learn, he asked his parents to pay Daniel to teach him how to make models. They agreed, and as Daniel taught him, Daniel caught the attention of Suzanne. They got along well, embodying the idea that opposites attract. Suzanne came from a wealthy, well-educated background, while Daniel had a different upbringing. He grew up in a low-income, dysfunctional family, was expelled from college due to poor grades, and worked part-time with his older brother Christian in a local garage. Suzanne was a young girl who was polite, which made Daniel's rebellious nature seem both unusual and intriguing to her. Unsure of how her parents would react to her relationship with him, she chose to keep it a secret. Eventually, her parents discovered that she was dating Daniel, who had come to teach her younger brother Andreas. Initially, her parents were unconcerned and even allowed their meetings because Daniel presented himself as a law student who enjoyed building model airplanes. However, her parents later discovered that he was not a student and that he smoked marijuana, drank alcohol every day. Like all parents, Manfred and Mauricia wanted the best for their daughter. As hardworking and wealthy individuals, they were unwilling to accept that Suzanne was involved with someone like Daniel. Meanwhile, Andreas, who loved his older sister very much and considered Daniel a good friend, became their ally. He often concealed their meetings while they enjoyed time together in hotels or at Daniel's house. Andreas devised elaborate excuses to protect his older sister Suzanne from their parents, but she eventually invited Daniel to live secretly in their home. They spent the entire month by the pool, singing and experimenting with various illegal drugs. When the parents returned home, they discovered how their daughter, Suzanne, had spent her time while they were away. In the following weeks, the family experienced many arguments and conflicts, which only made Suzanne more determined. One day, she boldly declared that her father, Manfred, should buy an apartment for her and Daniel so they could live together happily. Naturally, her father refused. He told her she could do as she pleased, but only if she used her own money. Manfred also warned her that he would cut off her allowance. However, she then continued her secret meetings with Daniel. In the early morning hours of November 1, 2002, the neighborhood around the Richthofen family home was shaken by screams. Suzanne and Andreas make a horrifying discovery. Their parents, Manfred and Mauricia, have died. Police arrived at the scene and found their bodies in the master bedroom. They were attacked while they slept, and evidence suggests a variety of murder methods. Manfred and Mauricia were so badly injured that they were unrecognizable. Mauricia's neck showed signs of strangulation, and a garbage bag was found over her head. It appeared that the family had been robbed, as money had been taken from a nearby suitcase and from other hiding places in the house. When the officers conducted a thorough inspection of the property, they uncovered several inconsistencies. For example, the alarm system did not alert the guard at that time. Upon further examination, it was revealed that the alarm had been turned off, indicating that the perpetrators likely knew the code. Additionally, the house appeared unusually tidy for a robbery crime scene. The documents and papers were scattered evenly rather than having been hastily thrown around. Furthermore, there were no signs of forced entry, no electronic equipment was stolen, and some rooms remained completely intact. The circumstances surrounding the case remain unclear, leading to various theories. The media focused particularly on Suzanne and Andreas. In the face of her parents' deaths, Suzanne was surprisingly calm. In interviews with the police, Suzanne and Andreas stated that they were not at home on the evening of October 31, 2002. That day, at 9 p.m., she took Andreas out of the house and went to a cafe without informing their parents. After dropping Andreas off near the cafe, she rented a hotel room and stayed with Daniel. However, by 4 a.m., she and Andreas returned home and discovered their parents murdered in their beds. At this point, investigators became suspicious. Suzanne's testimony contradicted that of her younger brother, Andreas. While Andreas stated that their parents disapproved of her relationship with Daniel, Suzanne claimed that they supported it, which was proven to be false. On November 1, 2002, the funeral for Manfred and Mauricia was held, attended by family, friends, and the media. Unlike her younger brother, Suzanne showed little emotion during the funeral, which raised eyebrows. It was later rumored that she threw a party just 3 days after her parents passed away. Witnesses noted how her demeanor quickly changed from grief at the funeral to laughter at the party, raising the suspicions of authorities. Additionally, an anonymous tip was sent to the police, warning of a purchase made by Daniel's brother, Christian. He bought a Suzuki motorbike for a large sum of cash just days after the murder. This purchase seemed suspicious because both Christian and Daniel were known to be financially struggling and had no stable jobs, along with issues related to alcohol and drugs. Acting on this information, the police took Christian to the station for questioning. Although he initially appears cautious and insists that he is innocent, he eventually confesses to the murders of Manfred and Mauricia. Daniel and Suzanne committed a serious crime. Christian alleges that they conspired to kill Suzanne's parents to inherit $17 million. The police quickly arrested both individuals and began questioning Daniel. He provided details of the crime, but his account was inconsistent with Suzanne's statements. While she said money was not the main motivation, Daniel claimed that inheritance money had a major influence on his decision to engage in crime. Despite their deep love for each other, they broke up shortly after being arrested. Suzanne was arrested, but she was later released pending trial, which was delayed for nearly 4 years. She has spoken with her lawyer and agreed to be interviewed by local media. During the interview, she became emotional, blamed Daniel for the situation, and claimed he ruined her family. She described herself as an unfortunate girl who fell into difficult circumstances and always missed her parents. However, she could not convince others of her innocence. On July 17, 2006, Suzanne, Daniel, and Christian stood trial for first-degree murder. The jury received detailed information about what happened on the night of October 31, 2002. At 9 that night, Andreas left the house with Suzanne while their parents were asleep. At the time, Andreas was only 15 years old and completely innocent. He just wanted to go out and play. However, Suzanne had even more sinister plans. After dropping Andreas off at a coffee shop, she returned home by car with Daniel and Christian. Although the family's security guard saw her, He did not perceive anything unusual. After verifying that her parents were asleep, she turned off her home alarm system. She then guided Daniel and Christian into the living room, where they put on surgical gloves and hoods before taking crowbars upstairs to the designated bedroom. At this point, Daniel and Christian began attacking Suzanne's parents, Mauricia and Manfred. Although it was very painful, they fought back fiercely. To quickly end the attack, Daniel and Christian kill Manfred, but Mauricia is still alive. In a cruel act, they placed a plastic bag over her head and tightened it, leading to her death within minutes. They then staged a robbery by throwing papers around the room and stealing any money they found. They eventually left the house, and to create an alibi, Christian went to a fast food restaurant to ensure he was seen. Meanwhile, Daniel and Suzanne stay at the hotel, later asking for a receipt to prove they were there at 3:30 a.m. At 4 a.m., Suzanne picked up Andreas and returned home, pretending to be shocked upon discovering the horrific scene. During the trial, she blamed Daniel for the incident, claiming he had been drugging her and manipulating her into agreeing to the murder. However, Daniel and Christian argued that they acted on their own desires and Suzanne's plans, stating they were trying to defend a girl with alcoholic parents. However, no evidence of alcohol was found in Suzanne's parents. Additionally, her credibility was questioned, and prosecutor Roberto threatened to label her as a criminal. She was portrayed as an evil blonde, with the conclusion that her true motive was to acquire her parents' hard-earned money and assets. On July 22, 2006, just 5 days after the trial began, Suzanne, Daniel, and Christian were found guilty of murdering Manfred and Mauricia. Suzanne and Daniel received 18-year prison sentences, while Christian was sentenced to 8 years for his involvement in the conspiracy. Suzanne then attempted multiple times to reduce or overturn her sentence. For example, she asked to be released, arguing that her personality disorder contributed to her crime. However, her request was denied. Since then, there have been several tragic incidents. Suzanne's younger brother, Andreas, had a hard time with the loss of his parents. In 2007, 3 neighbors were awakened in the middle of the night to find their home broken into. They caught the burglar, and when the police arrived, he insisted that he had not harmed anyone. He appeared frightened and expressed indifference about his life. This man was Andreas. Shortly after this incident, he was admitted to a specialized institution. The family home was left vacant. In 2014, it was sold to unknown buyers who painted the entire exterior white. Many people sympathize with Andreas. He has a good education and a bright future ahead of him. He was raised by 2 loving parents, but in an instant, everything changed. His sister Suzanne and friend Daniel were imprisoned, and his parents were killed. It's no surprise that he fell into a deep depression. Despite the tragic murder of her parents, Suzanne is likely to inherit their wealth after serving her prison sentence. With a 40-year sentence, she could be released by 2042 and become a multimillionaire. Currently, both Suzanne and Daniel are serving their sentences in a semi-open facility, which allows them to leave prison for special occasions. It seems that in Brazil, even those convicted of murder can take vacations. Welcome back to our channel. Today we will explore a new case, the case of Richard and Carla Van Dusen. In many cases, even the most trustworthy and kind individuals, who show no signs of criminal or malicious behavior, can become entangled in criminal cases. Their kindness and trust are sometimes exploited by dangerous individuals in society, leading to crimes that are beyond imagination. Carla Van Dusen was born on September 20, 1954. From a young age, she was easygoing, quiet, hardworking, and diligent in her studies. She married early, hoping for a happy family life, but her dreams of stability were shattered. Her first husband was cruel and manipulative, exerting total control over her. Carla was trapped in the relationship, unable to leave for a long time due to fear of his unpredictable and abusive behavior. When she finally managed to escape this nightmare, she was left with deep emotional scars and a lingering mistrust of others. However, one bright spot emerged from her first marriage: the birth of her son. Carla and her son shared a close and loving bond, and he became a true source of strength for her as she navigated the challenges of life. After her divorce, Carla lost interest in relationships with men and devoted herself entirely to raising her son. Years later, once her son was grown, she began to heal and decided to give her personal life another chance. This change was largely influenced by the persistence of a new suitor. Fate brought Carla together with Richard, a 55-year-old man with 2 daughters from a previous relationship. They met in 2000 when Carla was 46 years old. Their relationship progressed quickly, and within a few months, they decided to get married. For Carla, it felt like a miracle. She had nearly given up hope of finding her soulmate, but believed she had finally gotten lucky with Richard, who seemed like the perfect partner for the rest of her life. At that time, Carla worked part-time as a court stenographer, spending most of her free time with family and volunteering. Richard's daughters and Carla's son got along well, and everything appeared to be going smoothly. On November 27, 2003, a local businessman on Old Memorial Highway encountered a disturbing scene. He noticed a suspicious car parked across from his store. At first glance, it looked as though the vehicle had been abandoned in a hurry. Inside the car, he spotted a woman's handbag carelessly thrown on the floor. The windshield on the passenger side had a circular hole, as if it had been cut. What stood out the most were small reddish spots scattered across the front seats, resembling blood. Alarmed, he immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they found the vehicle unlocked and began examining its contents. Inside the woman's purse, they found documents, money, and personal belongings, some of which were scattered on the ground near the car. A mobile phone was also discovered nearby. Using the documents in the purse and the phone records, authorities identified the vehicle as belonging to the Van Dusen couple. While contemplating their whereabouts, the officers heard someone calling for help from hundreds of meters behind the road embankment. A person was frantically signaling and urging them to contact the police. Guided by this witness, the officers followed him to the scene. On a secluded, forested dirt road a couple of kilometers from the highway, the witness had stumbled upon 2 bodies. Spotting the police, he began shouting for help. Even a cursory inspection allowed officers to identify the victims as Richard and Carla. Both had attack wounds to the head by weapon. Police immediately launched an investigation. Detectives quickly determined that both victims were respectable individuals with no ties to crime, mental illness, or dangerous addictions. They also found no evidence suggesting Richard and Carla had any enemies. The investigation faced challenges due to the abundance of clues left behind, but this offered hope for identifying the perpetrator. The case grew more complex due to the distance between the bodies and the car, which indicated a struggle had taken place. It was evident that Richard had attempted to flee from the attacker but failed. Investigators believe the assault began inside the car, suggesting the perpetrator was already present in the vehicle. Richard either ran out of the car or was pulled out, after which the attacker beat him. Relatives and friends of the victims supported this theory, as Richard and Carla had never argued, let alone become violent with each other. Forensic experts thoroughly examined the car and the condition of the bodies. Their analysis revealed that Carla was inside the car during the attack. The bullet passed through her hand and head, killing her instantly. Richard, her husband, was attacked outside on the street and attacked in the head. Carla's body was then dragged next to Richard's body. Richard and Carla was found hundreds of meters away from their family car. These findings ruled out the possibility of a self-harm or one spouse killing the other. Evidence clearly pointed to the involvement of a third party. During the investigation, police learned that the Van Dusens had lost a car. The forensic experts discovered a driver's license at the scene. It belonged to a man named Henry Sullivan, a Florida resident with a criminal record, which immediately raised police suspicions. A database search revealed that Sullivan had a history of criminal activity, including possession of controlled substances, probation violations, and 2 aggravated assaults. His violent past made detectives believe they were on the right track. Investigators decided to locate and question Henry Sullivan in person. When the police arrived at Sullivan's apartment building, they immediately noticed something unusual. A bright red Chevrolet Cheyenne parked nearby. The car stood out in the impoverished neighborhood, as it was relatively new. When officers ran the license plate, they discovered the car belonged to the Van Duzens. The evidence against Sullivan seemed to be mounting. Detectives confronted him about the double homicide, catching him completely off guard. Sullivan denied any involvement, claiming he had no idea why the restored car was on his street. He even insisted he didn't have the car keys. However, he couldn't explain how his driver's license was found just meters away from the murder victims. The investigators were unsure if he was truly the killer. There seemed to be no clear motive for the crime. Carla and Richard were kind, hard-working people with no known enemies. Richard worked as a sales manager for a copier company and spent his free time restoring old cars, which he would sell before starting new projects. Carla worked as a stenographer and was deeply involved in her community. She sang in the church choir, volunteered at hospitals, and even dressed as a clown to entertain sick and injured children. Both were well-liked and respected in their city. Neither had ever been involved in violence or cruelty. The reason for such a brutal attack on these decent people remained a mystery. Sullivan claimed his license might have been stolen, explaining that he was often forgetful and had lost his expired license. When the police examined the document, they found no fingerprints on it, as if it had been deliberately cleaned. This was unusual because if Sullivan had dropped it accidentally, his fingerprints should have been present. This raised the possibility that someone had stolen Sullivan's license and planted it at the scene to frame him. The fingerprint analysis posed significant challenges. Forensic experts thoroughly searched the car, focusing on areas such as the door handles, back seat, and seat belts. But they found almost no traces of evidence. It appeared that the crime scene had been meticulously cleaned, leaving little to no clues behind. Initially, it seemed as though the killer had left no evidence at all. However, police discovered the bullet that killed Carla from a 9mm pistol. Coincidentally, Sullivan owned 2 weapons of this caliber. While one of them was inoperable, the other could have been the murder weapon. Forensic scientists examined the functional weapon in the lab, which Sullivan voluntarily handed over, claiming it would prove his innocence. A ballistic analysis was conducted to compare the bullets from Sullivan's weapon with the one recovered at the crime scene. After tests, the confiscated weapon, experts concluded that it did not match the murder weapon. Nevertheless, detectives did not want to discard this option completely since Sullivan had a criminal past, including one related to violent crimes. Investigators also considered the possibility that Sullivan was being framed or that he was not directly involved in the double murder. On the day of the murder, Richard and Carla had been planning to sell one of Richard's collectible cars, the red car found near Sullivan's home. The sale of the car would have involved a significant amount of money, which could have served as a motive for the crime. Forensic experts then turned their attention to analyzing blood droplets found at the scene, hoping to identify the killer's DNA. Their analysis confirmed that Carla had died inside the car. Inside the vehicle, only Carla's blood was discovered, while outside, only Richard's DNA was present. This information helped clarify the sequence of events. Initially, no evidence of a third party was found in the collected samples. However, when forensic experts examined blood traces from the car's steering wheel, they determined that the blood belonged to a third person. This revealed that someone else had taken control of the vehicle and driven it. Investigators speculated that the perpetrator might have injured his hand during a struggle or while cutting the seatbelt, leaving his blood on the steering wheel and he without realizing it. Now Detective Sullivan requested his DNA samples to compare with the evidence found in the victim's car. Sullivan agreed, confident he had nothing to hide. The test results confirmed that the blood found did not belong to him. So Sullivan was removed from the list of suspects. The investigators began to suspect that the license had been deliberately faked by someone in Sullivan's close circle, a ruthless individual with a history of violent crimes. Their focus shifted to Sullivan's brother, Justin. It was soon revealed that Justin had an outstanding arrest warrant for an unrelated case. On the night of the murders, Justin was stopped by a traffic officer for a violation. To avoid arrest, he gave Sullivan's name instead of his own, knowing the officer wouldn't verify his identity. The officer let him off with just a warning. Later, Justin likely stole Sullivan's documents and planted them at the crime scene to frame him for the murders. He had ample opportunity to do so and could have bolstered the police's suspicions about Sullivan's involvement by planting Richard's car outside Sullivan's apartment. As a result, Justin became the new prime suspect and was brought in for questioning. He denied any role in the double murder and provided an alibi. Justin claimed he was at a nightclub with friends on the night of the incident. While several witnesses supported his story, detectives suspected the friends might have lied or confused the date. The police then requested a DNA sample from Justin to compare with traces found on the car's steering wheel. However, the DNA profiles did not match. With the investigation at a standstill, detectives decided to revisit the case from the beginning, focusing more on Richard's car. While investigators were working outside, a man approached them on the street. He introduced himself as William DeParvine and claimed ownership of the car. William explained that shortly before the crime, he had purchased the vehicle from a collector. He said he had seen an advertisement for the retro car in a newspaper and went to Richard's home to inspect it. After being satisfied with the car, William paid Richard $6,500 in cash and took the car home. According to him, he had not seen the previous owners since the purchase and was unaware of anything happening to them. William did not arouse suspicion at first. He was a confident and well-educated law school graduate who even presented the contract and receipt signed by Richard. The documents clearly confirmed the car purchase. However, detectives decided to investigate further, and inconsistencies quickly surfaced. Witnesses revealed that shortly before the double murder, Richard and Carla had indeed found a buyer for the car. Richard was offered $13,500 for the vehicle, twice the amount William claimed to have paid. This made it clear that selling the car to William for $6,500 would not have been a profitable deal. With these revelations, detectives had new doubts, and William became a key suspect in this murder. He was called to the station for further questioning. William complied and admitted to meeting the Van Dusens at around 5:30 p.m. However, evidence soon contradicted his claim. Detectives discovered from phone records that Carla had spoken to her mother at 6:37 p.m. During the call, Carla mentioned they had found a buyer willing to pay a substantial amount and were planning to finalize the paperwork. Although she didn't name the buyer, she said the deal was agreed upon, and they had plans to meet later. So, at 5:30 p.m., it was impossible for Richard and Carla to have sold the car to William. After the phone conversation ended, Carla's mother couldn't stop wondering, why would anyone arrange to buy a car so late in the evening? The next day, Richard and Carla was found dead. Carla's mother was tormented by the thought that she might have been able to save her daughter. She was convinced the crime was connected to the car. When William was informed of this details, he appeared confused but stuck to his original account. He denied being the person Richard and Carla was supposed to meet that evening. This created a major inconsistency in his story since the timelines didn't match. Of course, the Van Dusens could not have sold the same car twice. Investigators later found that the psychological profile of William matched the description of the person who killed Richard and Carla. They also discovered that William had a history of violent crimes. At the time of the double murder, he was out on parole after serving 9 years for assault with a weapon. This criminal background further heightened the detective's suspicions about his involvement. The contract and receipt for the car sale were examined, and an expert confirmed that Richard's signature had been forged. Following this, William was asked to provide a DNA sample for analysis. However, he unexpectedly refused and invoked his rights without providing any explanation. At that point, the investigators did not have enough legal justification to forcefully obtain a DNA sample from the potential perpetrator. As a result, the detectives decided to pursue an alternative approach. That same day, a special team was assembled to monitor William's movements in hopes of finding an opportunity to collect the required DNA evidence. William was placed under 24/7 surveillance, and the police tracked his every move. This was challenging because he avoided public places like shopping centers and cafes, where it would have been easier to leave traces. His cautious behavior made the surveillance team's work even more difficult, as they had to carefully avoid detection. Being well-versed in criminal law due to his legal education, William was familiar with law enforcement techniques. During a previous term of imprisonment, he had dedicated time to studying and enhancing his knowledge of the legal system. William's university professors described him as highly intelligent, determined, and self-confident. His every action was meticulous and deliberate, reflecting a disciplined nature that aroused further suspicion. He constantly appeared tense, as though he feared being observed, which seemed to align with the theory of his involvement in the double murder. The police had been surveilling him for a long time. He followed the same schedule daily, going to work and returning home at the same times, rarely leaving his apartment. On weekends, he occasionally went to the store, but he appeared to have no friends and minimal contact with the outside world. The only social interactions he seemed to maintain were periodic meetings with his 2 daughters. His rigid routine, lack of social connections, and cautious behavior made it difficult for the authorities to collect DNA samples. After months of surveillance, detectives still lacked the crucial DNA evidence they needed. However, the suspect eventually made a critical error. During his Christmas shopping, he bought an ice cream and stopped at a shopping center food court. After finishing it, he threw the cup and stick into a trash can. Undercover officers retrieved the discarded items and secured the ice cream stick, which they sent to the lab. There, they successfully extracted a DNA sample from William. The results confirmed what investigators suspected. The genetic profile matched the blood found on Richard's car steering wheel. This proved that William was responsible for the crime. With this undeniable evidence, police arrested and charged William with 2 counts of first-degree murder. Despite substantial evidence against him, William steadfastly denied his guilt, claiming that Henry Sullivan was the true killer. During interrogation, however, his story began to shift, seemingly in an attempt to mislead the investigation. He admitted to meeting Richard and Carla the night before the murder, but claimed it was only to purchase a collector's car, after which they supposedly parted ways. Although he made slight adjustments to the timeline, his account became increasingly less credible. Despite this, William continued to insist that he did not shoot Richard and Carla, describing the car transaction as an ordinary purchase. The prosecution built its case on testimony from Carla's mother, who stated that her daughter had called her shortly before meeting William. Meanwhile, the defense lawyer argued that the genetic analysis used in the investigation had a margin of error, though it was so minimal that it did not affect the results. A second analysis was conducted, which confirmed William's involvement in the murders. Meanwhile, the defense attorney continued to focus on Sullivan, pointing out that his driver's license had been found near the crime scene. However, this line of defense ultimately failed, as no evidence, fingerprints, or other traces of Sullivan were found at the scene. The prosecutor's office presented a detailed account of the events from that tragic night. According to their findings, William met Richard and Carla and agreed to take a ride in a collectible Chevrolet Cheyenne to test its performance. He managed to lure the couple into their family car. Once there, he manipulated the situation to gain access to their vehicle. Instead of paying for the car, William pulled out a weapon and attacked Carla. Richard fled into the street, but William pursued and attacked him. After killing Richard, William cut Carla's seatbelt and dragged her body to where her husband's lay. During this process, he injured himself, leaving traces of his blood on the steering wheel. He then drove the victim's car to a store parking lot, abandoned it, and calmly returned home in the collectible Chevrolet Cheyenne. William had meticulously planned the crime, intending to frame a neighbor, Sullivan, who had a criminal record for violent offenses. Believing Sullivan's history would draw attention from the authorities, William planted Sullivan's license at the crime scene, ensuring it was wiped clean of fingerprints. However, his efforts backfired. Thanks to modern DNA evidence, William's scheme unraveled. During the trial, the prosecutor depicted the defendant as a cold and dangerous criminal who would commit double murder for just a few dollars. They described him as a serious threat to society. Despite this, the defendant adamantly claimed innocence and even requested to speak in his defense. However, the prosecutor intensified their efforts and dismantled all of his arguments. They presented extensive evidence against William, including the results of forensic examinations, DNA tests, shoe prints found near the victims' bodies, tire tracks from the red Chevrolet at the crime scene, and forged signatures on a sales contract. After deliberating for 3 hours, the jury found William DeParvine guilty of double murder. He was sentenced to death. In 2005, he was placed on death row. However, this was not the end of the case. William's lawyer filed multiple appeals and eventually identified a legal loophole. It was revealed that the death sentence had not been decided unanimously by the jury. Recent changes in Florida's criminal law required a unanimous jury vote for a death sentence to be carried out. Due to this error, a retrial was scheduled for 2022. Within weeks, the jury began deliberating the verdict. They spent time reviewing the case details. Although the prosecution recommended the death penalty, the jury failed to reach a unanimous decision. Under state law, this resulted in the death penalty being overturned. Instead, William was sentenced to 2 life terms in prison without any possibility of parole. He showed no emotion as the verdict was announced in court, while his 2 adult daughters cried. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Nicole Adamando. Christopher Grover and Nicole Adamando met in 2008 when he was 21 and she was 19. They both worked as gymnastics trainers at a fitness center and began dating in 2012. After Nicole became pregnant with their first child, they moved in together in Salt Point, New York. However, they were not in a hurry to get married. Their son Ben was born in 2013, and 2 years later, in 2015, they welcomed their second child, a daughter named Faye. Christopher took great pride in being a father of 2. But this seemingly perfect family life changed suddenly. At 2 a.m. on September 28, 2017, near Nicole's house, police officer Richard Sicily spotted a car stopped at a red light. When the light turned green, the car did not move. To get the driver's attention, he honked his horn. What happened next shocked him. The driver was Nicole, and her children were in the back seat. Seeing the police, Nicole got out of the car and told him that something terrible had happened in her apartment. She looked very worried and stressed. He later asked her to take deep breaths and exhale several times to calm down. Nicole reported that her husband, Christopher Grover, was lying on the couch in their apartment. She claimed that he had insulted and threatened her, prompting her to try to escape. Christopher was also in possession of a weapon. In a moment of panic, She grabbed the weapon and aimed it at him. He then threatened her, saying he would harm their children and himself. Desperate, she pleaded with him to let her go, promising to leave without telling anyone. However, he refused, insisting that she lie down next to him. Fearing for her life, she attacked him on the head. He fell back onto the couch and died. She then gathered the children, put them in the car, and drove away until she encountered a police officer at a traffic light. After speaking with the officer, Nicole called her friend Elizabeth and asked her to come over. When Elizabeth arrived, she was blocked from approaching Nicole. In a nearby parking lot, she saw ambulances and police cars rushing to the scene of the incident at Christopher and Nicole's apartment. The police entered the apartment and discovered Christopher lying on the couch with a bullet in his head. A weapon lay on the floor nearby and the rug shifted slightly. The shower was running, and in the bathroom, a broken laptop lay submerged in water. The police took Nicole to the station for questioning. Meanwhile, Christopher's mother, Gail Grover, was informed of the devastating news. She expressed disbelief, saying she had never suspected her son was facing any problems. Christopher was a kind and cheerful person who loved sports, held a black belt in Taekwondo, and worked as a gymnastics coach. One of his students, Bad Wellen, shared that Christopher was always upbeat and full of energy, constantly encouraging his students and never allowing them to feel discouraged. Nicole's friend Elizabeth provided a very different perspective. Elizabeth taught music at the school where Nicole's son, Ben, attended. One day, Elizabeth noticed that Nicole had a black eye. At that time, she was dressed in jeans, a long-sleeved blouse, and a scarf. Throughout the previous summer, she consistently covered herself in thick clothing. Other acquaintances had also observed bruises on her body, but chose not to ask her about them. Nicole often claimed that her injuries occurred during games, attributing them to an accidental hit by a woman from her gym. Concerns about Christopher's behavior were growing. Some people noticed he was becoming increasingly angry with his gymnasts, and there were rumors that he was abusing his wife, Nicole. During police questioning, Nicole claimed that she attacked Christopher in self-defense. She was subsequently arrested and charged with a second-degree crime, which could result in a 20-year prison sentence. A few weeks after the tragedy, Christopher's friends, family, and former students came together to release balloons in his memory. A friend of Nicole's, Elizabeth, had started organizing rallies and fundraisers to support her. Elizabeth shared that in April 2016, Nicole finally confided that Christopher was verbally abusive and that they frequently argued. Nicole explained that they had no issues at the start of their relationship, but after the birth of their son, their conflicts intensified. He began pressuring her to engage in intimate relations more often. On one occasion, Christopher violently pushed Nicole against a doorframe and assaulted her. 2 years later, when she was pregnant again, a similar incident occurred. After that, she sought help at a hospital. The doctor examined her and sent her home. A few days later, while Nicole was preparing breakfast for her son, Christopher entered the kitchen and demanded that she do something for him. Nicole sarcastically replied that she would do it, sir. He got angry and knocked her to the floor. Then he heated a spoon on the gas stove and burned her with it. Nicole sought medical assistance again, and the examination report confirmed that Christopher had burned her in several places with the heated spoon. Nicole said there were times when Christopher tied her up, abused her, and left her lying on the floor for hours. He eventually untied her, leaving her with red marks on her arms and neck. When Nicole confided in her friend Elizabeth about her situation, Elizabeth encouraged her to file charges against Christopher. However, whenever she thought about reporting him to the police, she hesitated, afraid that no one would believe her. Some were worried that taking action might worsen her circumstances. In the summer of 2016, Nicole decided to leave Christopher. She packed her things and took the children to Elizabeth's house. She saw Nicole's car drive by her house many times. Finally, she called Nicole, encouraging her to come in. Nicole agreed, but ultimately did not have the courage to do so and returned home. In the months before Christopher's death, Nicole visited a doctor 3 times, who noted several injuries on her body. In May 2017, the doctor noted burns on Nicole's skin. In June 2017, the doctor observed that Nicole's vulva was severely swollen and appeared to be turned inside out. By August 2017, there were more bruises on her body, along with her account of abuse by Christopher. In September 2017, the Protection Service received an anonymous tip to check on a family. Nicole said they had been informed that someone was coming to check the apartment. Concerned, Christopher packed a large bag with items he had used to abuse Nicole. He took this bag with him to work, then returned without it, and in a good mood. That evening, he called Nicole into the bedroom, handed her a weapon, and asked her to load it, holding up a bullet for her to see. Nicole did as he asked, and then went into the bathroom to take a shower. Christopher then entered the bathroom, threw his laptop at her, and asked her to have intimate relations on the couch. They moved from the bathroom to the living room. He was unusually gentle with her while they were intimate. Afterward, as Nicole rested in a chair, she thought Christopher had fallen asleep. Trying to get up quietly, she was startled when he pulled a weapon from under the pillow. In a panic, Nicole grabbed the weapon and aimed it at Christopher. He laughed and mocked her, saying that this would happen. He demanded that she hand the weapon over to him, threatening to kill her, their son, their daughter, and even himself. No one would survive. In response to his threats, Nicole attacked him on the head. In March 2019, Nicole faced trial for the death of her husband, Christopher Grover. Supporters, wearing purple to represent victims of domestic violence, stood by her side. Christopher's mother, Gail, argued that her son could not have harmed Nicole and believed someone was trying to draw attention by lying. She also recalled witnessing her grandson, Ben, hit Nicole with a guitar during a game. The prosecutor's office stated that Nicole was pretending to be a victim and insisted her claims of abuse were false. A forensic expert noted that the weapon was held to Christopher's head when it went off. At the time of his death, his head was resting on a pillow, and the bullet that killed him was found inside the pillow. Therefore, the prosecutor asserted that he was sleeping when Nicole attacked him. However, Nicole's lawyer accused Christopher of damaging the laptop and dunking it in water to erase the evidence. Although the laptop was found in the bathtub and examined, no information was recovered from it. Nicole reported that he had removed the hard drive from the laptop and disposed of it the day before the incident. However, prosecutors believe Nicole may have damaged her laptop to make others think Christopher was trying to hide evidence of a crime. Furthermore, the prosecution claimed that Nicole texted Christopher a few days before his death, in which she criticized him, called him a jerk, and said he was really stupid. They also revealed that 6 weeks before the tragedy, Nicole had messaged a friend, saying that she didn't know how to kill him without getting caught, and she ended the message with a laughing emoji. A lawyer argued that the situation was merely a joke, and that Nicole sent aggressive messages to Christopher for self-protection. Their apartment included a sewing room, where police discovered a video camera on the floor. Nicole alleged that he had thrown the camera down, but prosecutors believed that Nicole placed it there herself to suggest that Christopher was trying to destroy evidence of his abuse. The video camera contained no incriminating evidence. The prosecutor noted that Nicole had experienced trauma at the age of 5, having been abused during a sleepover at a friend's house, which led her to avoid spending the night at others' homes. As an adult, when she met Christopher, she confessed to having difficulties with intimacy. They didn't become physically close until a year into their relationship, during which he was caring and understanding. Prosecutors also argued that Nicole made up her story of abuse to get away from Christopher. She allegedly lied to her friends, doctors, and did not report the incidents to the police. A doctor testified that Nicole claimed she was abused by a worker who was renovating her mother's apartment building about 5 years ago. However, during the trial, A witness admitted she could not clearly remember the incident or identify the perpetrator, whether it was the worker or Christopher. Around the same time, Nicole met a married police officer who offered her a job as a live-in nanny. Christopher was familiar with this officer through work. It was revealed that Nicole had been in a relationship with this officer for several years, both before and after the birth of her son, Ben, and she stated that he also forced her into intimacy. During the trial, Nicole's lawyers presented photographs of injuries she sustained during her time with Christopher, claiming he was responsible for them. However, the prosecutor maintained that the injuries could have been caused by someone else, and it was unclear who had inflicted them. The prosecutor pointed out inconsistencies in the medical records from when Nicole was pregnant for the second time and went to the hospital. When answering many questions, she replied no, denying that Christopher had abused or burned her. The prosecutor argued that Nicole changed her story and returned to the hospital a few days later to assert that Christopher had burned her. The prosecutor argued that Nicole's primary motive was her fear of being exposed during an upcoming inspection by security services at their apartment. She feared they wouldn't find any evidence of abuse, which could lead to accusations of lying and loss of her rights as a mother. In contrast, Nicole's lawyer contended that she acted in self-defense to protect her children and had no other options. During the trial, friends, psychologists, doctors, and nurses testified on Nicole's behalf, expressing their support for her situation. A photo of Nicole clearly shows her injuries, including a large blister on her face and burns on her chest. Other images reveal bite marks on her shoulder blades and neck, which would be impossible for her to inflict on herself. A forensic expert also confirmed that there was no evidence to suggest Christopher was actually asleep at the time of the attack. Nicole spoke in court and maintained her version of the incident. She appeared emotional and anxious while testifying. She described Christopher as a good and kind father and coach, but stated that he behaved very differently in private. She claimed that after the birth of their daughter, he developed an addiction to adult films, watching them frequently and encouraging her to act out scenarios from those videos. She alleged that he recorded and posted other videos online without her consent, in which he insulted her and behaved abusively. However, these videos were not presented at trial. Elizabeth, a friend and music teacher, testified in defense of Nicole. She recalled an incident in 2016 when Nicole confided in her about having a miscarriage. Nicole's clothes were covered in blood, and she didn't want to go to the hospital because she was afraid of Christopher. Elizabeth mentioned a card that Nicole had made for Christopher when she first became pregnant, listing 25 reasons why he would be a wonderful father. The prosecutor argued that if Christopher was truly abusive, Nicole would not have given him such a heartfelt gift. However, Nicole argued that she had created the card before their relationship fell apart. After 14 days of testimony, the jury had to decide whether Nicole was a victim of abuse or a real criminal. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury dismissed Nicole's self-defense claim and found her guilty of second-degree murder. After the verdict, Christopher's mother felt relieved that her son's reputation, which had been unfairly tarnished, had now been restored. In February 2020, Nicole Adamando was sentenced to 19 years in prison. However, the case was not finished. Under the revised New York State Domestic Violence Justice Act, Nicole was entitled to another court appearance to present her claim of domestic violence for the possibility of a reduced sentence. Later, an appeals court decided that Nicole could be considered for a lighter sentence, reducing it to 7.5 years. While incarcerated, Nicole drew a picture of herself with Ben, holding on to hope that she would soon be released and reunited with her son and daughter. Supporters of Nicole continue to raise funds to help with her legal expenses